The unknown was lying on the ground. He coughed and said that was all they could get to. He must have been a swordsman since his sword was lying nearby. The young man didn't have the strength to fight anymore. There was another young man standing opposite. He looked like a demon. The young man looked at his opponents. Then he grinned and said that it looked like he had won. He smiled awkwardly and wiggled his wings. The main character's name is Yuki, and now he looks like a demon, but in the past he was a man named Sagawa Yuki. In general, after his reincarnation, he began to look like this. And when the young man was reborn, he got a pretty cheating ability. However, instead of being reborn as a human, he was reborn as a demon. The horn on his forehead and the wings on his back serve as proof that he is not human. Yuki couldn't help but look at the defeated opponents and thought that these guys on the floor were members of the hero's team. However, they are now lying on the ground. They were halfway to the demon lord's castle. Going higher, there are high-level demons and a room with a master. He thinks that even though they are halfway through the castle, Yuki does not understand what to do in such a situation. Until the hero defeats the demon lord, there will never be peace and tranquility in the world. If the hero is defeated by an ordinary demon, the world will fall into panic and chaos. The main character smiled and thought that it would be very bad if the world plunged into chaos. But now we need to heal the members of the group of heroes and dump their bodies in the nearest village. Yuki carefully looked at the bodies of the defeated people and thought about what he would tell the high-level demons that the people had just run away. He looks at the blonde-haired young man and thinks that this is a human hero named Yuga. He remembers how the hero shouted something about the holy sword Excalibur and also waved this sword right in front of the young man. Yuki in turn grinned and used explosive magic in response. Now the main character thinks that first he will transfer this guy, and now who should he choose in order to cure him first? Then he looks at the girl and thinks that the next member of the hero's team is a young magician named Makana. She continued to cast seductive glances at the hero throughout the fight, even before they started the fight. The young man was very annoyed by this, so he couldn't hold back and blew up this mage girl almost the very first. The third member of the team was a serious swordsman named Raven. He was cold and silent, but he looked too pretentious. This swordsman was very annoying to the protagonist with just his appearance, so he used high-level dark magic to make him disappear at the beginning of the battle. The hero said to make the swordsman disappear, but in fact he just made him invisible. So the others around him did not see him, but while the hero and the magician were in turmoil, the young man blew them both up with magic. At that moment, the hero felt nothing. Then the last member of the hero's team remained. This is a priest girl named Cecilia. After defeating the remaining members of the hero's team, he thought about how to deal with her. The main character walked at high speed behind the priest's back and simply turned off her consciousness. Yuki looked at Cecilia and thought that since she wasn't injured, he didn't think he needed to use healing magic on her. Then the young man looked at the girl carefully and was amazed that she looked very defenseless in this state. The main character thought that this girl was the perfection of beauty. He thinks about whether he should leave this girl as his prisoner, but if he does something reckless, the Lord will get angry at the young man. However, if he had to fight the demon lord, he was pretty sure he could defeat him. But even so, having prisoners is ethically unacceptable. The main character orders his servants that this is the last person and they must carry her. They agree to carry out the order. The young man says goodbye to his angel. 3 days later, a group of heroes consisting of the hero himself, an arrogant swordsman, a cunning magician, and a priest, break into the domain of the demon lord. The main character was happy and laughing at the fact that the hero and a stubborn bunch of stupid people had appeared, who had apparently returned for more. He introduces himself as the head of the Dark Knights, Yuki, and then says that he will personally send them all to hell. Yuki realized that he would announce his low rank to the entire hero group in a very confident tone. The hero said that Yuki's name turned out to belong to this demon. He then announced that Yuki was getting ready for the fight. Then the main character jumped aside from a powerful blow, and during the flight he looked at the priest Cecilia. The young man dodged the mage girl's magic attack as well as the swordsman's skills, but then he froze for a moment and looked at priest Cecilia. She didn't understand why this demon was looking at her. Suddenly, he was interrupted by the hero, who ordered the young man to fight with all his might. Yuki felt embarrassed and apologized to the young man, and then thought that for some reason he just looked at this girl. He agrees that he is a bit rude to enemies who are fighting seriously. Then the young man uses top-level dark magic, specifically a skill called Endless Darkness. The hero looked terrifyingly at the demon and was very scared. As a result, Yuki disabled all the members of the hero's team. They were lying on the ground, showing no signs of life. Then the young man approached the girl and thought that at least there were no visible wounds on her. She's just incredible, as she immediately used the magic of the barrier to protect herself. He thought it was a relief. He magnanimously treated the hero's team again before dumping their bodies in a nearby village. And a month later, he repelled the hero's team's attack again. Eventually, the demon lord and the high-level demons began to view the hero's team as very weak. He hates saying things like that, but he's the kind of guy who's different from others. If he wasn't here, then the hero's team would definitely have defeated the demon lord. The young man lies on the bed and thinks that very soon he will allow the team to pass on. However, that girl is not only beautiful, but he is sure that she even has a great character, and next time he will do what he has planned. After a while, the hero's team appeared. The girl magician told the hero named Yuga that today they must defeat that boring demon and finally move on. The main character looked neutrally at the arriving hero's team and thought that the hero's name was really Yuga. He thinks that there was no need to call him boring. He looked at the cool swordsman and thought that this cool swordsman was still as taciturn. He mentally examines the young man and thinks that he is silent, but he could have said something. Priest Cecilia shouted that they should fight to the limit of their own abilities. The young man thought that his angel was still so cute. He closes his eyes and thinks about what he has to get down to business. Yuki laughed and turned to the stubborn bunch of stupid people who had returned for more. He is the head of the Dark Knights named Yuki. He's ready to send everyone to hell. The hero and the swordsman rushed into battle. The young man shouted that he was ready to fight. The young man thought that, of course, they had no chance of defeating him given his cheating abilities. Little by little, they began to realize their insignificance. He thinks that's enough for today. The young man turned to the hero and asked him if he hadn't realized yet that he would never be able to defeat him. The hero asked, so what? He has to fight for the sake of those who are suffering right now. In that case, Yuki pointed at Cecilia and ordered the hero to leave this girl here. If they do, he will let everyone else go ahead. The hero, the swordsman, and Cecilia were very surprised, and the mage girl giggled. Yuki shouted that he would never agree to this since Cecilia was his valued companion. Yuki asked if he was really willing to miss such an opportunity. The deal is cancelled. They will start their journey again from the nearest village. The mage girl shouted to Yuga that they should accept this deal. The young man called the girl by the name of Makana and asked what she was talking about. The main character was watching all this. She turned to Yuga and asked him to think about it. The young man may be boring, but he has plenty of magical powers, and saving the world is a priority. The young man thinks that he asked to stop calling him boring. Hero Juge got angry and said that even thinking about having to leave Cecilia was just terrible. The magician girl replied that Cecilia couldn't do it right away. As long as they defeat the demon lord and come back for her before anything happens, so it's fine. The young man replied that they understood everything, so they were leaving now and Cecilia was staying here. The main character grinned and told them to get through. Yuga turned to Cecilia and replied that he swore they would come back for her without fail. Then the doors closed, and the young man thought that now that they were finally alone, and then he realized that he was getting nervous. Cecilia stood on alert and said that she was well aware that with her strength, she would not leave a scratch on the demon, but she would fight against the young man until her last breath. The girl started using the holy laser skill. At that moment, the main character put his hands in front of him and politely asked the girl to wait a second. Cecilia asked what had happened and if it was possible that the young man was waiting for her to let down her guard. The main character replied in the negative and said that it was all wrong and also that he was telling the truth. The girl asked, then what's the matter? Does the young man want to make fun of her before he kills her? The young man replied that if he wanted to kill, he would have done it in the beginning. At the same time, his heart began to beat faster. All he wants is to confess to the girl. The young man replied that he fell in love with the girl at first sight. He asks the girl to start a relationship with him. The main character looked at the girl with embarrassment, and she was very surprised by his confession. The girl suddenly makes a bow and apologizes to the young man. This apology shocked the young man. He huddled in a corner and squeezed his knees. The main character says that he was rejected and it's over. He wants to die. The panicked girl asked if the young man was really okay. Cecilia stopped and abruptly distanced herself from the young man, saying that he was an enemy. She started using her magic and then asked him why he wasn't resisting her attacks. The main character replied to her that she rejected him, so he just wants to die. The girl shyly shouted that the young man should not joke with her like that. Yuki replied that the girl is very sweet even when she's angry, although it doesn't matter anymore. The young man said that this was because if he continued to live, it meant that he would be permanently stuck here in this room. All he has to do is attack people, but she really doesn't want to attack people. The girl replies that she has never seen such demons as the young man. Demons are usually violent and savage. The main character replied that he had been reborn. In his previous life, he was a human. He's telling the truth. His name is Sagawa Yuki and he died because of an accident. She was surprised that he had been reborn. Cecilia asked if it was possible that he had been human before. And then she added a question about why then he would not unite with them, with people. The main character grinned and asked that if he had said that he was an ally of people, the girl would have believed him. The girl asks why he wouldn't defeat the demon lord then, wouldn't that solve his problem? The young man replied that he would never do such a thing. After defeating him, he would most likely be promoted to the next demon lord. Thus, he will be tied to this room. He's had enough of this lifestyle. So he took the opportunity and confessed to the girl. This was how he planned to end his life as a demon. He says her team is pretty strong, so they'll definitely be able to defeat the demon lord, he's pretty sure of that. He smiles and says that everything would be perfect. The girl approaches and says that it's not like that. Cecilia says that the young man is very strong, and why shouldn't he use his strength for the benefit of people? With such incredible strength, can't a young man transform into a human? This is how he will easily integrate into the society of people. She holds out her hand to him and asks if he will go with her to the outside world. On that day, the demon lord was defeated, and peace and tranquility reigned in the world. After some time in the capital called Minerva, everyone rejoiced because the brave hero had returned. The news that the hero had defeated the demon lord spread like wildfire, and the whole world rejoiced once. In Minerva, the capital of the Kingdom of Clarines, there was even a large-scale parade in honor of the hero. While the momentous event was taking place, he arrived at the Adventurers Guild. The young man looked at the building and realized that this was the place. After Cecilia convinced the main character in the castle of the demon lord, so he escaped. After also receiving the map from Cecilia, he headed to his destination, Minerva City. By the way, the members of the hero's team were told that he disappeared and played in the box. A young man enters the Adventurers Guild, apologizes, and says that he would like to register as a member of this guild. One man was surprised and said that he didn't think anyone would show up today, because there's a parade going on in honor of the hero's team. The man's name was Clayman, and he was yawning monotonously as he looked at the young man. The main character was surprised and said that he would like to register in this guild. Inwardly, Yuki wondered if this man had eyes like a dead fish, and if everything was okay with this strange man. The man asked if he really wanted to register as a member of the guild. He said that the staff was out now, and he didn't know what he needed to do. He considers all the staff to be kids who take time off to look at the hero. Then he found everything he needed. He gives the young man a piece of paper and asks him to write his details here. In general, all that is needed is to write his name, his age, and sign that his death is his personal responsibility. After a while, the young man hands over the paper to Clayman. The man takes the sheet and says that the boy's name is Yuki and his age is 21 years old. The man then gives the young man his own guild card. He asks him to try not to lose her, as replacing her will cost the young man money. If he does, he must lose her in the next 3 days, as this is a very annoying process and he will have to deal with it. Yuki replied that he understood, but he thought it looked like the rest of the staff wouldn't be back for at least 3 days. He thinks about Clayman and realizes that the man really hates his job and there must be a limit to his laziness. The man says that everything is over and the young man should try his best and give his best after 3 days. If he doesn't, then the man will be the one who will have to handle all the requests. That day, the young man ignored all the man's complaints and fulfilled as many requests as he could. While processing all the completed requests, he grumbled all the time. It's a pain in the ass, but it's not the hero's problem anymore. Towards nightfall, he lay on his bed and thought that from now on, he would raise his rank and save money. As soon as he makes enough money for a living, he confesses to Cecilia once more. Next time, she will definitely accept his love. As a result, the main character was so happy that he couldn't sleep all night. It's been a week since he joined the guild. He completed enough requests and was able to raise his rank to day level. Clayman asks the young man if he doesn't see beautiful ladies here. Everyone else submits their completed requests there. Then why does the young man come to him? Yuki smiles and says that at first he thought those beautiful ladies were the secretaries. But after a while, he got used to the man being the secretary of this guild. The man shouted that there was even more work because of him. Yuki thinks that even though the rest of the employees returned to work, he continued to hand over completed requests to Clayman. He probably complained about him, but he's doing a good job. Yuki said it was a man's job, so it was okay and he shouldn't complain about it. The man said that he was not a secretary in the first place. The day when there was a hero's parade has already passed. The main character didn't listen to his mumbling and started interrupting. But suddenly they heard some commotion. Yuki was asking what happened. The main character turned around and suddenly saw a familiar silhouette apologizing to the crowd and asking for permission to go. Yuki was confused and suddenly saw Cecilia. Everyone in the neighborhood was surprised and didn't understand what Miss Cecilia from the heroes team was doing here. After a while, Yuki and Cecilia were sitting in the carriage. The girl apologized and said that she really would like to find the young man earlier, but because of the parades and celebrations, there was no time left at all. The young man told the girl not to worry. He was finally able to enjoy life to the fullest. He always wanted to go to another world. The girl replied that she was glad to hear that the young man was not bored. Yuki got distracted and said that, by the way, the girl still found him. He praised her. The girl replied that at first she was worried about what to do because the young man probably changed his appearance. However, it turned out to be quite easy to find him. She looked at him with a despicable look. Yuki didn't understand what was wrong and asked the girl what was wrong. Cecilia sighs and asks what's really wrong. She said that the young man had not changed his name at all, as well as his appearance. The young man asked how he hadn't changed his name, and then asked the girl to take a closer look. Overcoming the pain, he broke off the horn and tore off his wings. He's afraid it's all going to grow back, but at least not so fast. The girl said that even so, the heroes team still remembers his face. After a while, the coachman informed Mrs. Cecilia that they had arrived home. The young man got out of the carriage and saw a large house. Suddenly, spears appeared in front of his neck. One of the guards asked the young man who he was. He must also step away from Lady Cecilia immediately. The young man looked at the guards indifferently and remembered that there were also whispers in the guild that some strange guy was walking with Lady Cecilia. The coachman also looked at him suspiciously during the trip. Suddenly, the girl stood right in front of the young man and ordered the guards to put away their spears, because this young man is her friend. Yuki glanced at the guards and thought that it seemed like they didn't like seeing Cecilia in his company. After a while, the young man and the girl were sitting at the table. Cecilia turned to Yuki and asked him if he could leave the guild. Yuki was very surprised and asked what the girl meant. He doesn't understand why she's suddenly saying that. Cecilia apologized for the unexpected request. Yuki thinks he just joined the guild. The girl asks the young man to let her explain herself. She agrees that the heroes team defeated the demon lord. However, this does not mean that the threat from the demons has passed. The young man puts his hand on his face and says that the girl is right. Even if the demon lord was gone, his troops were still there. Of course, they are not so good without command, but they can cause harm. Demons would be fine. Their leader is dead, so disagreements between the former allies will soon flare up again. Cecilia says that according to rumors, the Gallies Empire, known for its military might, has already begun preparations. In every country, including the Kingdom of Clarines, they try to get the best. For example, young ladies and daughters of fallen soldiers from many countries overwhelmed the hero with marriage proposals. Yuki thought that, as expected from a hero. Cecilia says it's not just about the hero, but about the rest of the team. Yuki abruptly approaches the girl and is asked if she is really being wooed. The girl says that she refuses, of course, but still. Yuki asks why the girl abruptly stopped talking. Cecilia says that, in other words, if you become famous at such a time, then the young man will also receive similar offers. That is why the girl would like to hire a young man and pay for his work. Yuki says it's true, so few people will know his name. However, he asks the girl if she has enough money to pay for the services of the young man. The girl says that without a doubt, Yuki is stronger than any S-rank adventurer. To be honest, even her entire fortune is not enough to hire him. But the young man has romantic feelings for the girl, so she thought. Yuki sees her confused face, and then takes off and says that this was the place to start. The main character agrees that he would like love between them, but not for money. He laughs and says that he has a cheat ability. Even if spies and assassins were sent to him, they would be in trouble. He also laughs and says that he will not succumb to female temptations, because only Cecilia shines in his eyes. Then, at one point, the young man realizes that he has returned to reality and was telling the girl all this directly. Cecilia started shaking and then she laughed out loud. She asks her to forgive her and says that she just couldn't resist. The main character looks at her in disbelief and waits for an explanation. She says at first that she can't, and then sighs and says that it's definitely over now. The girl said that she did not expect to hear such an answer. Even crocodiles flew out of her eyes. The young man said that he shouted something strange in a fit of emotion. The girl says that she is beginning to believe more and more that Yuki was a human being in another life. Because is there at least one such funny demon in this world? The main character asks her and says if she really didn't believe him until now. Cecilia says she just made sure of it one more time. Yuki smiled awkwardly and wondered why she was talking like that. After a while, the girl said that she had more things to do, so it was time for her to go. The girl smiled and said that it was fun today, so she suggests that the young man meet again. Yuki replies that he had fun, and then he says that he has one more request. He got embarrassed and asked the girl if he could call her Cecilia. The girl smiled and agreed, and also said that she would call the young man Yuki. The young man was full of delight. She said goodbye to the girl and went to her house. Having agreed to meet Cecilia in the future, the young man enthusiastically went home and thought that they had become a little closer to each other. After a while, the young man was happy that today was a wonderful hike and he could see Cecilia. And he was also elated that he seemed to have a fun weekend. Then the young man came to the mansion, but they wouldn't let him in. The guards replied that the hero had now come to meet the lady, so he should leave quietly. Yuki thought that even though they had agreed, there was nothing they could do. So he exhales and thinks he's going to go for a walk around the city. On the streets of the city, he notices a crowd and wonders what its cause is. Then they see a beautiful swordsman who attracts a lot of attention. Yuki says he feels like he's seen him somewhere before. They tell him that he is saying this because this is Raven himself, who is a swordsman and a partner of the hero. The main character looks at the confused look of the swordsman and thinks that he doesn't seem to know what to do with this crowd. The young man decides to help him because he is in trouble. Then the young man shouts to the crowd that the hero is in that direction. Everyone quickly ran off in the direction that the young man pointed out and thought that it was easy. At that moment, Raven was standing alone and didn't know what to do. Suddenly, Yuki grabs his hand and tells him that they need to run away urgently. After a while, they enter an alley and Yuki says they kind of ran away. At the same time, he periodically glances at the street so that if people are heading in their direction, he can react. The young man wonders if the swordsman will really remain silent in such a situation. He thinks that he didn't help to be thanked. Yuki advises Raven to change his clothes so that he can walk quietly. He is about to leave, but suddenly the young man asks Yuki to wait. Yuki was surprised that the swordsman was talking. He thinks that the young man surprised him. The main character couldn't believe that such a cold-blooded handsome man had a voice like in an anime. The main character asked if the young man was silent all the time because of his voice. He says that everyone has things they don't like to mention. He has them too. Raven asks if the young man will mock his voice. Yuki replies that it's not the boy's fault that he has such a voice. Raven says that the young man is completely different and he doesn't laugh at his voice. Yuki realized that the swordsman seemed to be suffering because of this, so he remained silent all the time. The young man replies that he's not laughing at it because he's already met guys with that voice. Raven smiles. Yuki thinks about leaving before they think he's being disrespectful to the hero's team. He tells the swordsman that he is leaving, but the young man asks him to stop. Raven asks Yuki if he could be his friend. The latter is very surprised by this suggestion. The swordsman adds that if the young man doesn't want to, then it's okay. It's just that the only one who didn't laugh at his voice was his mom, so he thought Yuki might become a close person to him. The main character thinks that he doesn't mind becoming friends at all. Then he tells me his name and says it's nice to meet you. The swordsman rejoices and says that his name is Raven and reciprocates. Yuki thinks it's been 20 years since he reincarnated here, so it's the first time he's made friends with someone. Raven then says that the young man reminds him of someone, but Yuki says he just imagined it. After a while, the young man comes to the Adventurers Guild and orders breakfast. He thinks that his breakfast is very modest, but now it seems that if he does not eat breakfast, he will receive an assignment. Then a woman suddenly approaches him and says that the young man eats interestingly. The main character is surprised and thinks that he did not notice how a beautiful woman came here. At that time, the young man was eating bread. She says that, as her daughter said, the young man is very interesting. Yuki is surprised. The woman smiles and says that her name is Celia Aquarine and she is Cecilia's mother. She is very pleased to meet Yuki. The young man is surprised and says that he is very pleased to meet you. Then he suddenly takes the whole salad in his hands and swallows everything in the plate at once. The young man awkwardly asked the woman what she wanted from him. Celia giggled and said that the young man shouldn't have eaten so quickly. She compliments him and says that the young man is really very interesting. The woman says she was informed that their guards were rude to the young man the other day, so she came to apologize. Yuki is surprised and says that he really thought that they didn't treat him very well, but he had a meeting later, so he didn't take it personally. The young man thinks that Celia is not a bad person. The woman rudely asked about the meeting the young man was talking about. She had heard that he loved Cecilia. Celia asks what kind of relationship the young man has with her daughter. In a panic, the young man began to deny and says that he was dating a guy friend. The woman smiles and says she misunderstood. It would be very terrible if her daughter got involved with a bad guy. She apologizes for suspecting the young man. Yuki was shaking all over, and then he said that everything was fine. Celia says that everything is fine and then invites the young man to go together. Yuki asks where the woman is calling him. She asks if it's not obvious. She calls him to her mansion. Then the woman asks if the young man wants to see her daughter, Cecilia. Yuki is very happy and agrees, and then says that he really wants to see Cecilia. After a while, they come to the mansion. The young man turns to Celia and asks about the guards who are standing at the gate, and then says that these are completely different guards. The woman says that those guards were rude to the guest, so this should not be left. She asks the young man if he wants to know the details. The young man refuses. Celia laughs and asks him not to be so afraid. Those guards were just being punished by their head maid. Their main maid has the rank of an adventurer. Due to some circumstances, she stopped being an adventurer and got a job as a maid in their house. The young man thinks that a rank is probably incredibly strong. Celia says that when she gets angry, she scares, but treats her husband well. Once she and her husband had a big fight, and 6 months ago he completely recovered from a serious injury. He's also an A-rank adventurer, so it was only a bruise. It's very good that we found a nurse for the mistress. Somehow they are happy spouses. Yuki thought he was a little worried about her husband. Then the girl says that she's easy to talk about. A beautiful maid girl came up to them and greeted her mistress. She notices Yuki behind the mistress' back and says that she is the maid of the Aquarine family. Her name is Sophia. The young man greets Sophia and introduces himself. He thinks she doesn't look like a simple person at all. Celia asked Sophia if her husband was okay. The girl gave a negative answer and said that he was losing consciousness all the time. It would take time for him to get back to normal. Yuki thinks that he will pray for those guards. Sophia turns to the lady and the young man and says that she will take them around the mansion. Then Celia waves to Yuki and asks him to come here. He looks through the doorway and sees Cecilia there in a very light outfit. The girl noticed that people were looking at her and was very surprised by this. Suddenly, Celia abruptly moved aside and Yuki continued to watch the girl. Cecilia screamed at the whole house about what Yuki was doing here. Celia laughed and said that her daughter is definitely not a morning person. At that moment, the young man lay all beaten up and thought that Celia had deliberately framed him, and Cecilia's unexpected magic strike was too strong. After a while, Cecilia got dressed and looked at Yuki, who was on his knees. Celia asked her daughter to forgive the young man because she looked good anyway. The young man agreed and said that it happened because of his mother. Yuki asked why the woman had brought him here. The woman replied that he had talked to Cecilia at their house the other day. She reports that she saw them. The panicked young man asks if the woman really heard what he was saying. Celia mimics the young man and says that it was very cool when he said that there is only Cecilia in his eyes. He also struck a funny pose. Yuki realized that this woman had seen everything. He asked me to kill him. Then Celia grins and says that now they will move on to important things. The young man knows perfectly well that Cecilia receives many marriage proposals. The young man says that Cecilia told him about arranged marriages. Celia announces that one of these offers was from a hero. Terrified, Yuki asked what it meant. She smiles and says that the hero seems to like Cecilia. Yuki asked what their response was to this suggestion. She refused. The woman asked the young man not to worry, but the hero does not give up. Yuki screamed and asked what was wrong with this guy. He ordered him not to fall in love with her, as there is already a magician in the team. He swears that nothing will interfere with his love. Celia smiled and said what the young man thought of the hero. Apparently, he loves Cecilia very much. The girl also says that she wants to ask Yuki something. The woman asks if he wants to marry Cecilia. Suddenly, the girl became embarrassed and asked her mother to stop. Celia interrupted them and ordered them to answer yes or no. The young man thought that this might be the only chance. Yuki bows her head and apologizes. He agrees that the woman's offer is very tempting. He also confessed his love to Cecilia and was rejected. But when he becomes a decent person, he is going to confess to her again. But when she suddenly started talking about marriage, it took him by surprise. The woman said that she had heard enough. She smiled and informed the young man that he had passed the test. She won't give her daughter to the first person she meets. Yuki screamed and asked if the woman had really tricked him again. The woman replied that if a bug got attached to her daughter, it would be just terrible. She will be glad if her friend is a young man. A woman with kind eyes looks at a young man. Yuki thinks that Celia liked him somehow. After a while, the young man came to the Orselsky forest. Today, because of an errand, he came to this terrible forest. Since he has been working in the guild, the young man has risen to the C rank. He's been working hard lately since he found out that the character likes Cecilia. He wants to be a little like him. The young man came here with the task of subduing the Curalisk, must be somewhere in this place. Yuki passes by and suddenly sees some rustling in the bushes that were nearby. Suddenly, the young man feels something. He abruptly jumps aside. Landing on his feet, he decides to attack the stranger with magic. But a knight without a head appears in front of him. He stops and addresses Yuki as the captain. He was surprised and turned to a girl named Duke. He thought about how, when he lived in the castle, she was a subordinate of Dullahan. When Cecilia persuaded him, he left everything without saying a word. It turns out she is alive. The knight rushed to the captain and asked where his wings and horns were. She asked where they had been all this time. When the young man disappeared, the demon lord was defeated, so they were worried and went to look for him. The young man asked to calm down. Duke reported that Happines and Sheik were also worried. Yuki was surprised and asked if the two of them were really here too. Duke pointed out that there was a place a little further away where they were supposed to meet. She asks the captain to come with her. After a while, a girl with wings and a cute young man appear, who turn to the captain and tell him that he is alive. One of them looked like a heavenly angel. Happines was a harpy and Sheik was a pixie. They were Yuki's subordinates. Sheik rushed into Yuki's arms. The young man stroked her head and told her that they were still alive. Duke asked Yuki not to think about the fact that they were dead. The pixie laughed and said that because the hero and his team defeated the Lord, the three of them escaped from the castle, and when they ran away, Duke cried all the time and called the captain. Yuki realized that they were always thinking about him. Duke said she couldn't help herself because she was worried about where he was. Happines said they couldn't leave the young man alone, and Sheik replied that sometimes the young man switches over and shouts strange words. Yuki realizes that he doesn't like the way girls think of him. The girls and Sheik say it's good that they found him, and then they ask where the captain's horns and wings are. He replied that he had torn them out and thrown them away. Suddenly, they rushed at the captain and asked what the young man had done. The pixie was laughing at that moment. Yuki watched and listened attentively to what was being said to him. Yuki also said that he confessed his love to the cute priest from the hero's team, but was rejected, and now he is a human being. The girls looked at the young man in horror. Duke turned to the young man and asked why he was chasing a girl. After all, they are his family and it is very sad. The main character replies that he is now a man named Yuki and is no longer the captain of the girls. This means that they can live as they want. Duke denied this and said that the captain is the captain. Happines agreed with Duke, and Sheik said she didn't want it either. Yuki started to deny it, but Duke interrupted him and asked if this priest was really cute. Happines replied that she was beautiful, and Sheik informed her that she was very beautiful and had a good body. Yuki thought that the girls weren't listening to him at all. The girls started whispering that the captain is now a man in love, so the girls need to meet her right now. They turned to the young man and in a commanding tone asked him to take them to her. Yuki replied that he was busy right now because he needed to subdue the chickens, so he didn't have time to take care of them. The girls replied that they had accepted the order. At the same moment, Happines replied that the task was completed and now it was time to go. There were also a huge number of dead monsters behind her. Yuki replied that if the girls say that, then they should be ready for anything. The girls responded positively. After a while, they looked like ordinary people. Even Duke got a human head. To keep her head from falling off, Duke tied her helmet to her armor. She also said that all this was bothering her. The young man also thought that Sheik without wings was just handsome. Since he had small wings, they could just hide them under their clothes. The problem arose with Happines. Since she is a harpy, she grows feathers from her arms and legs. Out of respect for her determination, the young man removed all the feathers from her body. He thinks about how Happiness wanted this, so he has nothing to regret. After a while, the young man came to the Adventurers Guild and said that he was done with the chickens. Clayman asked if the three of them were really Yuki's friends. After that, turning into beautiful people, Yuki took the three of them to Cecilia's mansion. After a while, arriving at the mansion, Cecilia told Yuka that he was just terrible. Happines complained to Cecilia about the feathers. She hugged the priest and said that she was very kind. Cecilia told Yuki that no matter how important it is to disguise yourself as a human, you need to think about the girl's feelings. He has to think about his behavior. Yuki confessed that he had done incredibly badly. Now he began to regret it. Cecilia asked the young man if they were really just Yuki's former subordinates. It seems to her that they respect him very much. Duke said that this mansion is very big, and Sheik added that only the mansion of the Demon Lord is much bigger. Yuki replied that this was the case now. Duke wasn't like that at first, as Durakins are usually very quiet. The girl replied that at first she hated the captain since he was from a rather famous demon family in the Lord's castle. Cecilia was surprised, and Duke replied that the captain was famous for being a hikikomori. One day, he told his boss Zakir that it would be better for him to leave the room before he lost his temper. She also added that she tried to persuade the captain many times, but then she got tired and stopped contacting him. Cecilia laughed at that. She also said that there were rumors about him, so she tried to fix it as a subordinate. But then she was just beaten up, and she became who she is now. Yuki thinks that at that time she was his first subordinate and he was inspired. Perhaps he changed a lot in the girl's soul. Cecilia asked how he met the other two friends. The main character began to talk about how he met Pixie Chic, and then asked where they had gone. He got scared and said that they had really left the room. They're in disguise now, but anything can happen. Yuki came out and saw Sophia telling Kappens that she had a perfect angle, so she shouldn't forget about the angle. Yuki turned to Sophia and said that she was with him. Sophia was surprised and asked if she really wasn't a new maid. A new maid was supposed to come today, and she thought it was her. Yuki grabbed Kappens, who had changed her clothes, and led her away from Sophia. Sophia replied that she was very sorry, she would have made an excellent maid. Then Yuki thinks that now she needs to find Chic. Yuki thinks he's very inquisitive, so he's afraid for the little pixie the most. After that, the young man notices a garden in the window. He understands that he was worried, but apparently for nothing. At that moment, Chic was lying on Celia's lap. The woman stroked Chic's head and said he was poor and lost. The woman then turned to Yuki and asked him if he had really brought the two girls here. Yuki shouted that they were just friends. Yuki asked if Chic really didn't bother the woman. Celia replied that she loved children, so he didn't bother her at all. He was just running around the garden and playing, and she joined him. After playing enough, he fell asleep. After a while, the young man turns to the girls and asks if they are satisfied, and then says that they are leaving. Then he turns around and asks them not to say they're going with him. Duke confidently says that they will go. Happens also agrees, and Chic rejoices and says that of course they will go with him. They began to live together. However, it didn't end there. The next day, the young man came to Cecilia's house where Happens met him. Sophia hired Happens to Aquarine's house as a maid. The girl saw the young man off and wished him a pleasant stay. Yuki realized that the girl really likes it. He was greeted by Celia, who was delighted that the young man had come. She wished him to sit on that side and then asked if the young man had seen the new maid. Celia asked the young man what he was doing today, because she wanted Yuki to accompany Celia on vacation. Lately, because of the engagement talks and the team meetings, she's been getting very tired. That's why she wants to give her a day off. The young man says that Cecilia is very serious. She can't refuse without a good reason. Besides, Cecilia is a girl. She wants to go shopping. Celia wants the young man to be with her all the time. Yuki blushes and realizes that it means an officially allowed date. Yuki is happy and announces that he will definitely keep her company. Celia says that's what she thought the young man would say. In truth, the carriage is already waiting outside. Celia says that Cecilia is expecting a young man. After a while, the young man comes out of the mansion and sees Cecilia in a very beautiful image. Yuki apologizes to the girl and asks if she waited long. The young man understands that he has always wanted to say this. Cecilia was wearing something else today. This outfit suits her very well. Cecilia said that everything was fine. She thought that if she called Yuki, he would come right away. After a while, Yuki and Cecilia come to the city. The young man asks if he really needed to change clothes. Cecilia replied that if she was discovered, it could also harm the young man. Yuki replied that he would try very hard to make everything go well. Cecilia smiles and says she's really looking forward to it. The young man and the girl spent the whole day very well. They went shopping where Cecilia picked out dresses. She tried on one of them and Yuki really appreciated it. Cecilia was happy that it was a lot of fun today. She's been very tired lately, so she's going to have a good rest today. Yuki was delighted and said that he was very glad to hear that. Then they see an accessories store. Yuki asks Cecilia if they will go there and the girl agrees, but suddenly a stranger notices them. That someone was a hero and a magician. The young man was surprised that this someone was Cecilia. The girl was embarrassed and tried to cover her face with a hat. The hero started shouting the girl's name, but his mouth was covered by the girl who stopped him. She whispered to the young man that they were hiding right now. She asked why the young man was calling Cecilia by name and if he really wanted her to be recognized. The young man says that he understood everything and then apologizes to Makana and Cecilia. Cecilia replies that there is nothing to worry about. The young man thanks the girl for her forgiveness. Then the hero asks what the girl is doing here. He also says that they haven't taken days off recently, so they decided to go for a walk now. He's beaming all over and asks if the girl wants to go with them. Yuki starts to get angry and thinks that the hero doesn't notice him. Cecilia turns him down and says she's already out with a friend. The hero asks again about her new friend. The hero says that in this case he can go with them because they wanted to go to this store. Then the young man grabs the girl by the hand and invites her to come with him. Makana and Yuki are left alone. The girl gets angry and says that they have a date with the hero and it's a complete disaster. She looks after the young man with sad eyes and says that she had such a hard time inviting him for a walk, so that she could go shopping like in the old days. Yuki thinks about the old days and assumes that the hero and Makana have been friends since childhood. The young man looks like a gambler, but is he really a simpleton? Then the girl turns to the young man and asks if he likes the priest. She noticed that they were together, so they probably had a date. She asks if the young man could do a better job, then Yuga might give up on the priest. It seems to her that he can't really count on a man with such a gloomy face as a young man. Then she changes the subject and invites him to come with her since it is impossible to leave them alone. The young man thought that she would help him, but she has a very bad temper. Then they enter the store. Cecilia calls Yuki and apologizes for leaving ahead. Yuki doesn't pay attention and says that there are a lot of decorations here, so he offers the girl something to buy that she likes. Suddenly, Yuga appears between them and tells the girl that he will also buy jewelry, so he offers Makana and Cecilia to choose what they like. Yuki assumed that the young man was competing with him, but he agreed to buy jewelry only for Cecilia. Yuki guesses what will suit Cecilia and then finds the right piece of jewelry. Then Cecilia puts on a beautiful piece of jewelry and says that Yuki has good taste. It was a modest pendant with a lovely shining stone. Suddenly, Yuga bursts in and tells Cecilia that he also chose her jewelry. His jewelry was very large and flashy. Yuki realizes that the young man is definitely not all right, as he chose a very large stone. At that moment, Yuga took off Cecilia's hat and invited her to put jewelry on it. At that moment, Mikin and Yuki got scared. Everyone around shouted that it must be Cecilia, and next to her was a hero. And if you looked closely, there was Mikin next to her. The crowd began to squeeze everything. Mikin blamed Yuga for his clumsiness. The hero called Cecilia and the girl called Yuki. After a while, all four of them got out of the store. Yuki suggested that everyone finish and they agreed. The young man thought that Yuga would regret it. The next day, Yuki came to Cecilia's place, but he was met by Celia. The woman was very angry. Yuki found out that Cecilia was ill, so he was very scared. He started asking if the girl was okay. Celia replied to calm the young man down as the girl was currently sleeping in her room. It looks like yesterday's hype got to her. Yuki fell into despair and thought that it was all his fault. Celia asked the young man not to be so upset. They say it's a simple cold, so she'll be cured in a few days. She also said that she wasn't mad at Yuki. She asked him to keep the girl company yesterday. However, as for the hero, the woman heard that he wanted to take care of the sick Cecilia, but the woman sent him home. She also said that yesterday was just a bad day. Yuki was scared. Celia then added that Cecilia had said that the young man had tried to cheer the girl up yesterday. If there is another opportunity, she asks to join the company again. If the young man wishes, he can visit Cecilia before leaving. After a while, the young man comes to the girl's room and apologizes for yesterday, as the girl's precious day off was lost. Cecilia said it wasn't Yuki's fault, and then the girl said it was all Yuki's fault. The young man asked what it meant that it was all his fault. The girl replied that it was all Yuki's fault that her day off ended like this, so he should try hard next time. Yuki suddenly blushed and thought about what it meant that Cecilia had set up another date for him. The young man abruptly stood up and started shouting for the girl to give him everything, since yesterday's date failed. But the next one will be fine and the girl should wait for him. Then he was kicked out by Sophia because her younger mistress was more, and the young man did not keep quiet. A few days later, Cecilia fully recovered. After calming down, the young man came to the guild to work. Clayman was in a very good mood there. He asked Yuki to listen to the news from his life. The man said that his wife has been in such a good mood lately. Yuki didn't understand why he was listening to him all the time. Clayman says that something must have happened at her job and she treats him so kindly. Yuki thought about what if Cecilia married him and looked great every day, like meeting him in the morning. The young man became embarrassed and started slapping himself on the cheeks. His thoughts were interrupted by Clayman, who was surprised by the noise in the hall. Raven came to the guild. Yuki was very surprised when he saw him. The young man approached the main character and pointed his finger at the exit. Yuki realized that because there were a lot of people here, he was silent. Yuki reached out to Clayman and said that he wanted to complete the order with Raven, and then asked if there was anything good. Clayman offered them an order to kill a stone dragon. This order is a B rank. Raven tugged on the young man's shirt, and Yuki at that moment said that they would take up this task right away and set off. After a while, they were riding in a carriage. Yuki was very surprised that Raven didn't want to fulfill the order. The young man agreed, and Yuki then apologized and said that he just misunderstood. It turns out that Raven just wanted to go to the city with him. The young man smiled and said that everything was fine because he had never completed an order with a friend. Yuki thought that the young man was very kind and suggested to Raven that they should eat together when they had finished their order. They'll deal with him before sunset. Raven agreed with the young man. After a while, Yuki and Raven were already in the forest. The swordsman was able to defeat several monsters, and then turned to Yuki and said that when they were done here, Raven wanted to compete with the young man. He was surprised that he had killed someone. Yuki then agrees and says that you need to kill the dragon first. After a while, a dragon appears. Raven orders Yuki to get ready, and at that moment the young man himself thinks that he has a very strong hide. He casts a spell and thinks it should work. The young man then uses a storm punch and pierces through the dragon's body. At that moment, Raven dodges the dragon's blow. Yuki strikes again and Raven ends the fight with a sword thrust. The young man tells the swordsman that he did well and is glad that they finished very quickly. Raven said that Yuki had a great shot and they would provide the rest to the guild staff. After a while, Yuki and Raven came to the tavern to have a snack. Yuki asked Raven what he wanted to talk to him about. Raven asked if Yuki would listen to him, to which the young man replied that if he didn't mind. Raven says he's in love. The young man was very embarrassed by his own words. Yuki was very surprised, but Raven added that he could only discuss this with the young man. The main character wondered if Raven really wanted to get some love advice. He asked Raven what kind of person he was. The young man replied that the girl was not laughing at his voice, but on the contrary said that she was jealous of his voice. The latter gets embarrassed and says he doesn't know what to do. Yuki thought he was acting like a teenager. After all, he is a handsome man. Yuki thought that Raven was one of the members of the hero's team who was handsome. He has overcome his complex with his voice, so you need to give him a good answer. The young man jumps up and asks if the young man knows anything about himself. Yuki screamed, telling the young man that he was handsome and tall. Besides, he is one of the members of the hero's team. If his voice is strange, then he should ignore him who laughs at his voice. He asks me to look at him. He's an ordinary adventurer with an expressionless face. How many times he confessed and how many times he was refused. He says that if the young man starts acting now, then everything will be fine. Yuki orders Raven to believe in himself. The young man agrees with the main character and says that he is right. He seemed to be thinking about it too much. Raven thanks Yuki and says it's good that he consulted with the young man. He says that he will confess to the girl tomorrow and then asks Yuki if he wants to go with him. The next day, the main character met with Raven and saw that the young man was trembling very much with fear. Yuki tapped the young man on the shoulder and told him to listen to him, and then asked if Raven was a member of the hero's team and a knight captain. That alone makes him very cool, so the young man must pull himself together and believe in himself. The main character encouraged the young man after him and said that he could do it, reminding him that he was handsome and also wishing him good luck. After a while they came and the young man thought that this was the Aquarine mansion. Raven looked at Yuki and thanked him because now he would be able to confess to the girl. He says he's gone. Yuki realized that Raven's lover was really Cecilia. It turns out that he helped his opponent. He turns from place to place and thinks about how Cecilia will respond. Raven returns after a while. He tells Yuki that he was rejected. The girl replied that it was impossible. He thanked Yuki for her advice. After that, upset, he said that he was going home. Yuki thought that the damage from the first failure was too great because even he had experienced this before. He thinks he needs to meet Cecilia. After a while, Yuki met with Cecilia, but the girl replied that Raven had not come to her. Yuki was very surprised and wondered if Raven really hadn't come to see her. He realizes that his beloved is not Cecilia. The girl asked what happened, so Yuki decided to tell her. Cecilia realizes what's going on and then suggests that it might be one of the servants. Yuki is happy, and Cecilia says that she will need to ask Sophia and maybe she knows something. Then they come to Sophia, and the girl confirms that Mr. Raven came recently, and then asked to call one of the maids. Sophia says he seems to have asked for the new Hepines. Next, they come to Hepines. Yuki asks if the red-haired handsome young man came to the girl recently. He confessed to her and that the girl replied. Hepines says she replied that it was impossible. Yuki said that the girl had met that swordsman before, so can she tell me how their meeting went? The girl shouted that she couldn't tell and then ran away. Yuki tries to stop her and then says that she will have to come again. After a while, Yuki says that he wants to discuss the situation with Hepines and Raven. Cecilia agrees and says she needs to help Raven, but why is Duke here? Yuki says it's because she's known Hepines for a very long time. The girl says that first she will explain the situation related to Hepines. She asks if Yuki and Cecilia know that harpies are the target of the hunt. They both agree with this. Harpies are beautiful demons. There is no end to people who capture and enslave harpies because of their wings. Of course, Hepines is no exception. People caught her one day and Duke saved her by accident, so that's how they became friends. That is why Hepines will not be happy with a man who confesses his love to her. Cecilia looked sadly at Duke, who was talking about it. Yuki said that he didn't think Hepines had made such a bad impression on Raven. Cecilia added that Yuki said that when she heard Raven's voice, she envied him. Duke replied that harpies are a race that likes to sing, so she might have been attracted to Raven's voice. Yuki said it would be nice if Raven could hear it. The young man said that before going, he would visit Raven in the Knight's building. A young man enters Raven's room and sees him weakened and lying on the couch. Raven apologizes to Yuki and says that he tried so hard to help him. Yuki says it's okay and he would like to ask him something. Yuki asks how Raven met his beloved. The young man gloomily asks what Yuki will do when he finds out about this. Yuki says Raven gave up early, so he should tell him about it. Raven says he was doing a street crawl and thought there was nothing unusual. Then he noticed a girl standing in the alley, and next to her were 3 men who invited her to go for a walk with them. Raven took out his sword and pointed it straight at the men. They tried to attack him but got hit right in the stomach. The men were about to run away and said that this young man is Raven from the heroes' team, and he is also the captain of the Knights. The men were upset because they missed a very beautiful girl. Then they ran away. Raven exhaled and said that men are real barbarians. The girl pulled Raven back and said that he had a very pleasant voice. The young man was surprised and then covered his mouth with his hands because he realized that he had something to say. Hepines added that the young man has a very pleasant voice and she is incredibly jealous of him. Raven was surprised and asked what the girl meant. Then she thanked the young man for his help and said goodbye to him and then left. That's how Raven met Hepines. He asked if that was enough for Yuki. As far as Yuki understood, Raven would also like Hepines. He pulls it out and says he needs to go outside. They are greeted by Duke, who calls her captain. Then she goes up to Raven and says that this is really the guy who confessed to Hepines. Yuki confirmed this and told Raven that this girl is an acquaintance of Hepines. Duke said that Hepines has a male-related injury and asks if Raven can heal her. Yuki realized that Duke had replaced people with men. Although Hepines hates people, this does not apply to Sophia and Cecilia. Raven replied that he didn't know that. Duke became inflamed and said that it would be cooler if the young man said that he would save her. She called Raven just a wimp. The young man got angry and asked the girl what she said. Duke was also furious, and Yuki was trying to calm them down and not start a fight. Duke says that then, for example, they can become friends with Hepines first, and that's how Raven can help her. After a while, Raven and Duke shook hands. The girl wished the young man good luck and Raven thanked her. Yuki thinks that's how a strong friendship was born. Soon, the heroes arrived at the manor. Hepines was sweeping the yard and doing her job. Then Raven came to the estate and Yuki watched from the side and wished the young man luck. Hepines saw the young man. Raven was very confused and then asked the girl if she would be friends with him. The girl looked at the young man and then agreed to become friends with Raven. In the end, everyone was just happy. Then Yuki heard that Cecilia had indirectly influenced Hepines' decision. And the good news was that Duke joined the Night Squad under Raven's command. It was because of this that Yuki began to live with Shite. The young man constantly asked the captain to play together. After a while, Yuki and Shite rode in the carriage and Cecilia rode with them. The young man was happy that he was riding in a carriage for the first time. Shite was happy and called the captain to look out the window. Yuki asked Shika to calm down. The main character was thinking that they were on their way to Daga's village for work. Since Cecilia is a priest, she has to treat people, so the young man decided to help her, and when they got into the carriage, Shike was already sitting there. The young man was sulking because he thought that they had decided to leave him. Cecilia said with a laugh that he was so glad that Yuki and Shike had decided to go with him, so she thought they would finish their work quickly. Yuki asked the girl to rely on them. Finally, they arrived at Daga's village. Cecilia said they were attacked by bandits. Then the headman came out to the girls' group and was surprised, saying that Cecilia had really arrived after all. The girl looked around and said that the situation was much worse than she thought. She asked the headman if they could gather all the wounded in one place. The headman agrees and then looks at Yuki and Shike and asks who these people are. The girl says that these are her friends who came to help her. They're capable guys, so the headman doesn't have to worry. The headman bows and asks the boys to take care of them. He says he'll call everyone else. After a while, Cecilia treats the injured people. The young man also uses healing magic and thinks that Cecilia is getting more and more tired. He's a cheat, and a sheik who uses medicine is one thing, but Cecilia, who uses magic, is another. She can run out of it quickly. The young man turns to Cecilia and asks if it's time for her to rest. The girl says she's fine, but then she collapses. The young man uses the magic of the holy bell on her. Then he addresses the citizens and says that he apologizes, but Cecilia is already at her limit and she needs to rest. He asks if there's a place to lie down. One of the citizens says that there is a vacant house there. Yuki turns to Shike and says that they will finish everything later. After a while, Cecilia turns to Yuki. The young man turns around and says that they have already finished. Cecilia smiles with an evil smile and says that the young man understands perfectly well what the girl wants to tell him. Yuki apologizes to the girl for drugging her with magic, but if she had continued at this pace, she would have fainted. He says that sometimes a girl feels like she's overdoing it. Cecilia smiled and then thanked Yuki for her help and care. Yuki smiled, was embarrassed, and thought that the girl was incredibly cute. Then men approach Cecilia and Yuki and tell them that a girl named Till lives on the outskirts of the village. They ask if the girl could examine her too. They report that the girl is not injured, but she has been in poor health since birth. Cecilia agrees and asks for directions. The men report that they need to go east of the village. After a while, Yuki, Shite, and Cecilia come to a small house on the edge of the village. The girl asked who they were. She was sitting on the bed reading a book, and then she said that Yuki, Shite, and Cecilia were not locals. Then she suddenly coughed. Cecilia apologized for coming uninvited. The village headman asked them to come. Shite approaches the girl and asks her to take the medicine. Yuki asks Till not to worry. Shite may look like that, but he's very smart. After a while, the girl says that it became much easier for her. Shite says that the girl is very lucky. When the bandits attacked the village, she was not there. He gives her some medicines and tells her to drink them for a while. Till suddenly starts fussing and says that the young man is wrong, because she was protected by the guardian god of this village. Yuki asked which guardian god the girl was talking about. The girl says she heard it from her deceased grandmother. She told her granddaughter stories about him. The girl says that it was he who saved her then. Apparently, Till carried an offering to the guardian god every day, which her grandmother had told her about. And on the day when the bandits attacked the village, Till was carrying an offering, and on the way back she felt sleepy and so escaped the bandits. Shite talks about severe drowsiness and says it's something from dark magic. Yuki thinks it's a nightmare sleeve, but it's the same spell that causes scary dreams. Cecilia turns to Yuki and says that this guardian god is somehow suspicious. Till replies that there is nothing suspicious about this. Yuki asks where this guardian god is. After a while, they go straight to the temple of the guardian god. Till says that the statue of the guardian god is very close, and if they are in doubt, then the girl will show them all. Cecilia, Yuki, and Shite looked at the scene with stone faces and thought that no matter how you look at it, it looks like a statue of a demon. Till screams that she doesn't ask them if they mock the guardian god. However, she starts coughing. Cecilia takes her away. Yuki looks at all this and then tells Shite that no matter how you look at it, this statue doesn't look like a guardian god. Shite says it's more accurate to say that it's most likely a demon. Yuki says that firstly, such statues are not made for guardian gods. Secondly, it looks like a trapped statue from the castle of the demon king, namely a gargoyle. Then the statue's eyes light up and the statue comes to life. The demon attacks Yuki and Shika. Yuki says he knew it. And then he says what kind of god is he if he's just a demon? Then the young man looks at Shike, who has disappeared. Suddenly, a young man with a terrifying face appeared right in front of the demon and then kicked it right in the head. The demon was defeated, and Shike rejoiced that he had won. Shike asked Yuki what they would do with the demon. He turned to the gargoyle and asked if he could speak. The demon screamed that if they wanted to kill him, then let them. Shike had already drawn his blade and was preparing to kill the demon, but Yuki stopped him. The young man tells the demon that he just wants to talk to the demon. The gargoyle asked if they really hadn't come to kill. Yuki replied that he had attacked them first. The gargoyle bows and says it was rude of him, so he apologizes. He heard that they recognized his appearance. Yuki also tells him to forgive them too, and then asks why the gargoyle calls himself the guardian god. The demon says that perhaps it is possible to tell this to the young men. This happened hundreds of years ago. He appeared to protect the temple. However, back then, he did nothing every day and slept all day. Shike started laughing and says it's very similar to Captain Yuki. Then the gargoyle continued and said that one day he was doing his usual thing and sleeping. During his sleep, he was taken away from the castle. Shike started laughing, saying that it was very funny. As soon as the demon realized this, he escaped from the cart and almost killed these thieves. He never left his temple, so he couldn't come back. He wandered aimlessly until he came across this village. The thieves who brought him here attacked the village, so he punished them. Shike kept laughing. After he took revenge and calmed down, he settled in this temple, and the villagers themselves named him God. Yuki thought about how he was just a simple demon. The gargoyle continued and said that later they began to believe that he was a guardian god. There is one girl who came to the temple to clean it, although she is weak in body. Then he found out that bandits had attacked, so in gratitude he hid the girl from them. Yuki asked if he had done something to Till. The demon asked her not to talk nonsense and said that he had not done anything to her. He sent her a sleeve of nightmares, but she was just sleeping. That's the end of his story, and now he's asking me to tell him about the boys themselves. After a while, he laughed and said that Yuki's situation was worse than his. because the demon had fallen in love with a human. Yuki said there was nothing funny about it. He mimicked the demon and said that he was lost like a child. Shite continued to laugh at this time. Yuki then suggests leaving it. He then asks if the demon is going to do something bad. The gargoyle replied in the negative and said that he would just live in this temple. He's not going to do anything to this village, including helping. Yuki says there's no problem then. He tells Shite that they are coming back. After a while, Yuki and Shite return to Till's house. Cecilia laid the girl on the bed and then asked Yuki that they had done a good job and asked if they had learned anything. Yuki asks if Till is really sleeping and then says that the guardian god turned out to be a gargoyle. There is a demon in the village, but it won't bother the villagers. He's been living quietly for several hundred years, so Yuki thinks it's going to be okay. Cecilia says she doesn't think it's that simple. Shite says that they are starting to talk about serious topics now, so he wants to leave here to eat. Yuki gives Shite the money and tells him that they can buy themselves something delicious. Shite begins to rejoice and shine. Yuki then decides to continue. He suggests keeping this gargoyle for a while. They now need to heal the residents and deal with the bandits, and they are just asking the residents about the gargoyle. Cecilia says he's really right, so they should focus on treatment. Till was sleeping sweetly on the bed, and Yuki said they had to go, but try not to wake the girl up. They went outside, and Yuki thought that it was very romantic to walk under the full moon. Cecilia asks the young man about what happened. Yuki gets embarrassed and says it's nothing like that. They continued walking through the night forest. The next day, Yuki announced to Cecilia and Shika that their task was to ask the residents about the gargoyle during the treatment. Cecilia gathered herself and announced that they were starting treatment. She asks the residents to line up. The men immediately lined up in front of Cecilia. Yuki realizes that it's perfectly clear what these men want. Then he hears someone thanking Shika. He turns around and sees a huge number of girls next to Shika. He understands that Shika is very popular with young girls. But the young man gathered only the elderly around him. They thanked the young man for their salvation. Yuki didn't waste any time and asked if they knew anything about the guardian god. People asked the young man if he was talking about the demon statue that stands deep in the forest. The main character realized that they know this statue. They said they knew that Thiel worshipped her deeply. He asked why the girl was so attached to this god. It was explained to him that in the past, Till sometimes cleaned up and brought offerings to this statue. One day, she was attacked by Red Fang. Till was 7 years old at the time and her health was poor. And when she already thought that the end had come, the statue of the guardian god came to her aid. However, people don't believe it. Everyone is afraid of this statue and does not approach it. Yuki is surprised by this, but understands why Thiel worships this statue so much. After a while, Cecilia apologized and said that she had been asked too many questions, so she couldn't ask them about the gargoyle. Yuki said he would beat up those who molested the girl. The girl asks the young man to stop because the treatment was just delayed. She then asks Yuki if he has found out anything. Yuki tells Cecilia everything. The girl says that the gargoyle did not attack the residents. The main character reports that, as he understood from conversations, the residents consider the gargoyle harmless. Cecilia says she wants to talk to him just in case. Yuki understood and then tells Shika to go to Till and visit her. The young man agrees. After a while, Cecilia and Yuki come to the gargoyle. The demon got angry and asked if they were really talking to people about him. Cecilia bows and says her name is Cecilia. Because of the bandits' attack on the village, she came here to treat the residents. The demon said that she was the girl Yuki was talking about. Then he asked the girl what she wanted from him. The girl asked if the demon really wasn't going to attack the village. The demon said he had already told the kid that. He's not interested in attacking this village and he just lives here. Cecilia realizes that this is exactly as she was told. Yuki then said that he wanted to ask something. The young man asks if the gargoyle likes cute girls. The gargoyle didn't understand what that meant. Yuki realized that there seemed to be no such word in this world. The gargoyle demanded to know about this word. Yuki said it was a word from his past world. After a while, the gargoyles were told about everything. The demon shouted that he would never do such a thing and would not have feelings for little people. The gargoyle ordered the young man not to look at him like that. He says that if they were done with their conversations, then he went to bed, and then they didn't dare tell the girl about his real form. After a while, Yuki and Cecilia were on their way back to the village. Cecilia asked if the young man himself was not the one who looked after young children. Yuki smiled and asked Cecilia not to worry about it because he only loves her. The girl was embarrassed and asked the young man not to say that. Yuki interrupted her and told her that they needed to get back to Shika and Till. After a while, Till asked Shika to wait. The girl was beaming all over and said that she wanted to tell the young man so much about the guardian god. Shika was very upset and even started crying. Till was holding the young man's hand and she was beaming, but Sheik was crying and holding out his hand to the captain, begging for salvation. Yuki was silent and just looked at everything that was happening. Till asked Yuki and Cecilia to listen to her stories too. Yuki scratched his head and apologized to Till, and then said that they had to get up early tomorrow so they would go home. Sheik shouted at the captain and cried, but the young man told Sheik to come back for dinner. After a while, Yuki and Cecilia were returning home. The girl asked the young man if everything would be all right with the Sheik. The young man replied positively and then added that Till would have fun for sure. Yuki then took Cecilia by the crayfish and told her to be careful as it was dark now. The girl agreed and thanked the young man. Cecilia then looked at Yuki. The young man was embarrassed and looked away. Cecilia smiled and was also embarrassed, so they returned home in complete silence and embarrassment. It was already late at night when the main character was sleeping in his guest house. Suddenly, he wakes up and sees the headman rushing into the house, who was begging for salvation. He announced that the village had been attacked by bandits. Yuki abruptly got out of bed and called Shika to get out of bed. The young man couldn't get up and muttered that he had just fallen asleep. The sound of sword blades could be heard all over the village. The villagers were fighting the bandits. Cecilia ran up to the main character. The girl was on alert. Yuki called Cecilia and said that the villagers had started to defend themselves, but there were mostly wounded people there, so they would not be able to repel the attack. Then Sleepy Sheik approached Cecilia and Yuki. Yuki told the young man to pack up, and then he turned to Cecilia and said they needed her support. The girl agreed and rushed along with the young man. Sheik yawned and then said he was off. Then the young man deftly jumped up and was right behind the bandit. The man turned around and angrily asked what kind of child he was. Suddenly, Sheik jumped up high and kicked the bandit in the head in the air. The other men noticed him, but they didn't have time to say anything, as Sheik deftly eliminated most of the bandits. Cecilia was amazed that Sheik was very strong. Yuki said that he easily misleads his enemies with his agility. The young man said that this was his subordinate. The main character also said that now he has to get busy too. Cecilia activated her magic and said that she would support the young man. The main character thought that he couldn't use large-scale magic here. Yuki uses a storm drill spell and impales an attack on a man who is attacking a young man. Then the main character turned around and saw smoke coming from Till's house. The main character called Sheik and told him to run to Till's house, and they can handle it here on their own. The young man said that he understood and then ran towards Till's house. After a while, the main character exhaled and wiped the sweat off his face. The villagers cheered as they dealt with the bandits. It wasn't long before Yuki realized that Sheik hadn't returned yet. The main character thought that Sheik had really lost to the bandits. Cecilia came up to the young man and did not understand why he was so serious. Yuki said he had a bad feeling about it. Then he took off in the direction of Thiel's house. Cecilia called after him. Then Yuki ran to the right place and was very surprised. Till was hugging a wounded gargoyle, and Sheik was shielding the two of them from some young man with a sword. The protagonist's eyes opened wide due to the shock. He tried to ask me what was going on, but I couldn't say a word. The unknown man turned to them and arrogantly asked what was going on. He looked at Yuki and Cecilia and thought they were villagers, but then he saw the girl and said he knew her. Cecilia also recognized this young man. Suddenly, Sheik rushed to the unknown and tried to attack him, but the young man defended himself with a sword and asked Sheik to stop these attempts to attack. Then the unknown man pushed the young man, shouting at him. The Sheik flew off and hit a tree. The heroes immediately called out his name. Yuki saw his angry face, but he grabbed his shoulder and ordered him to stop. Yuki asked to calm down and asked what happened here. Sheik replied that the gargoyle was protecting Till from bandits, but he was suddenly attacked from behind. The young man was surprised and asked what was wrong with killing demons. He thought he had killed him, and if the young man was responsible for him, he should teach him manners. Sheik began to tremble and cry. The young man asked why he was crying, and since that was the case, let him deign to be silent. Then the young man was suddenly attacked by Yuki. The main character noticed that his magic had disappeared during the attack. This surprised him very much. Cecilia shouted at Yuki to stop, because his magic was completely useless against this young man. Yuki asked Cecilia if she really knew this man. Cecilia replied that this young man was a hero of the Garis Empire, and his name was Myra. His sword, called the Magic Absorber, can absorb magic. That is why the young man will not be able to use the attack. Yuki immediately stopped her speech and asked if there were any other heroes besides the ones they all knew. To which the girl explained that they are heroes of different kingdoms. Cecilia replied that other kingdoms have their own heroes, but they were the only ones who got to the castle of the Demon Lord. Yuki thought that he just didn't know. Due to the fact that the magic absorber was developed in the Empire, it has several skills. They also make magic swords. Besides them, there are also spears and hammers. At that moment, the young man turned to her and asked if she would talk for a long time. He waved his sword and ordered them to finish already. Yuki asked Myra to wait and said that this gargoyle was only protecting Till. He doesn't attack people. The young man asked Yuki what he was saying because he was just killing demons. Cecilia turned to Yuki and said that he didn't have the same pride as a hero. Yuki realized that becoming a hero requires a reason to kill demons. Myra said that it must be a chore to accept guild orders. But he, in turn, just wanted to kill this demon. At the same time, he grinned maliciously. The young man kicks away the till, but the girl grabs his leg and denies it, trying to protect her guardian god. The young man replied that Till was bothering him, so he was ready to kill her too. Cecilia asked him to wait. She says that the young man, being a hero of the Garis Empire, is really going to raise his hand against the inhabitants of the Kingdom of Clarions. The young man grinned and then said that he didn't know, and if he wanted to, he would definitely raise his hand. He points the sword directly at Cecilia and tells her if the daughter of the Aquaran family will really go against him. Yuki then takes Cecilia by the shoulder and pulls her aside. The girl turned around and called Yuki's name. The young man looks at Yuki and asks if the young man really wants to fight him. He calls him a redneck and grins. Yuki looks attentively at the young man and then at Mr. Gargoyle. He thinks to himself that the gargoyle looks terrible because his arms and wings were cut off. He looked at the crying Till and the sobbing Shik. For these two, as well as for pointing the sword at Cecilia, the hero would never forgive the young man. He orders him to get ready because he will show him hell. Yuki then unleashes her magic. The young man laughs and says it's useless because his magic won't work against him. At this time, the young man puts a sword in front of him and absorbs all the magic of Yuki. The main character grinned and said that he was just greeting the young man. Then he used another spell, but this magic was absorbed by the young man's sword. He smiled and said that he had already said that Yuki's magic was simply useless. He asked if Yuki would use a weapon, but the main character smiled and said that, unfortunately, he could only use magic. The young man waved his sword and said that in this way Yuki would lose to him. The blades from the sword flew towards Cecilia and Yuki. The main character used his magic to protect Cecilia. He thought that he was very pleased that his beloved girlfriend was worried about him. But if he delayed any longer, Cecilia and the others might suffer. Then he releases even more magical power and asks the young man if he can absorb this. The young man holds out his sword and stiffens, clenching his teeth. He sees that there is an incredible amount of magic and his sword begins to crack. Suddenly, Yuki appears in front of him who punches the young man. Yuki says he got caught. The young man loses consciousness, and Yuki grins and says that the young man should not have angered such a great him. Cecilia says that Yuki is great, and then asks if it was necessary to get into this position. Yuki says that when something switches in him, he becomes a little different. Then he looks at the lying Shik and says he hopes he's okay. Cecilia said that he wasn't seriously injured, so he would recover in 2 or 3 days. Then the young man who had recently been defeated by Yuki came to his senses and threw a sword straight at the gargoyle. Yuki noticed it too late. The blade flew straight at the gargoyle's head, but Till appeared in front of the demon, who shielded him from the blow. The blade pierced through Till's body and the girl began to fall, losing consciousness. Yuki caught her and tried to pull the blade out of the girl's body. He thought that things were going badly and he didn't make it. Then Cecilia ran towards Yuki and Till in a hurry. The girl immediately began to use healing magic. The gargoyle turned to the girl and asked why she had done this and sacrificed herself. Till replied that the demon had saved her so many times, so this time she wanted to thank him. Till was running out of energy. At that moment, the young man stood up and said that Till had interrupted him again. He didn't think that the magic absorber could ever break. He smiled and said that it was fun today, so this time he forgives them all. Yuki looked at him and asked if he really hoped to escape so easily. The young man laughed and told Yuki not to be a fool. He then created a wind bow and launched the arrows straight into the sky. Thus, the young man used the skill of a hail of arrows. Yuki realized that things were bad, and so he used magic to destroy all the remaining arrows. Yuki then looked around, but he didn't see anyone. The young man ran away. He told Cecilia, apologizing, that it was his fault, as he was very inconsiderate. The girl looked at Yuki and said that he didn't need to apologize, as she couldn't do anything either. Yuki clenched his teeth and thought that he was terrible. He had a superior physique and endless magical power. These were his cheats, so he thought he could handle it very well. In this world, he's not as good as he thought he was. He looked at the gargoyle, Shika, and Cecilia and Till. Yuki then turned to Cecilia and asked about the villagers and if they really shouldn't come here. The girl thought about it and said she thought they wouldn't come here. Then Yuki's wings began to shoot out of his back and a horn formed on his head. Cecilia was scared when she saw that Yuki had acquired the image of a demon. He said he would catch up with the world and destroy it. The girl flinched in horror, but then Yuki smiled tenderly and told her not to worry because he would just inflict a few injuries on him. The girl looked uncertainly at the young man, who told her to take care of Till while he was away. Next, Cecilia only watched Yuki's silhouette receding into the sky. The young man chased after the world, and then pulled on a scarf and thought it would be a good idea. Then Yuki finds her target, who wanders among the trees. He lands on the ground and Myra turns around abruptly. He shuts his mouth and wonders where another demon came from. Suddenly, Yuki disappears from his field of vision. Myra didn't understand where the demon had gone until his head was pinned to the ground by the Yuki River. Then Yuki jumped back and Myra asked what he needed. Yuki asked the young man with an evil look if he was really the one who chopped off his subordinate's arms and wings. He got angry and said that for such an act with his faithful servant, the young man deserved only death. Myra laughed and said it would be difficult, but all he had to do was kill the demon. Then he charged straight at Yuki, but he didn't move until the last moment. Myra ordered him to die. Yuki opened his eyes and then kicked Myra, and the young man flew to the side, breaking trees with his body. The young man cleared his throat and said that the demon king had already been killed, so why were there such strong demons left? At that moment, Yuki came up to him and said that he was very weak. The main character thinks that at this moment he is not an ordinary person, he is a dangerous demon. Myra grabs a dagger and starts attacking the demon. Yuki anticipated his attack and moved aside, wondering if the young man really thought of killing him at such a speed. Yuki grabbed the young man's arm and he realized that it was useless. Then the main character used fire magic and hit Myra with all his might so that he would lose any strength. Yuki grabbed the young man by the collar and then flew into the sky. Myra asked where the demon was taking him, to which Yuki replied that he was not worthy of dying at his hands. They arrived at a river with a strong current. Myra shouted that it couldn't be. He screamed that he was going to kill the damn demon. However, Yuki released his hand, and Myra began to fall straight into the depths of the waters. Yuki thought that this river led to the Garis Empire, so if the young man was lucky, he would return home. Yuki's sinister form then evaporates and he regains his normal appearance. The young man says that now it's time to return to Cecilia. He understands that this view is not suitable and now he needs to pull out the rock and wings, which will be very painful. After throwing Myra into the river, Yuki returned to Cecilia. The girl was very worried about the young man, and especially because of his demonic appearance. The young man himself does not want to be in this form, because he now lives as a man named Yuki. The next day, Till was able to survive and was cured by magic, or maybe because a gargoyle was holding her hand all the time. Sheik felt very depressed because of the loss. Yuki hopes that when they return, Duke and Happines and Cecilia will help him. It is also the day of leaving the village. They need to say goodbye to Thiel and everyone else. Suddenly, they hear a scream coming from Till's house. Yuki bursts through the door and calls the girl's name. Till woke up and rejoiced that the guardian god was able to visit her house. She talked about how her house was covered in dirt. She apologized and said she would leave right away, but the gargoyle told her to go to bed because she was not cured yet. Cecilia and Yuki were watching all this. The gargoyle ordered Till to lie down now. Then he turned to Cecilia and Yuki to help him, and if this continues, the girl will only get worse. Till turned to the guardian god and said she had one humble request. She asked if he could call her by her first name, Till. The gargoyle agrees and addresses the girl by name and then tells her to lie down until she feels better. The girl was screaming in delight because the gargoyle had called her by name and now she thought she could die. After a while, Till apologized to everyone for her behavior because Yuki and Cecilia even came to her house. Cecilia replied that there was nothing wrong and everything was fine. Thiel then says it's good that they came because she wants to talk to them. Yuki asks what the girl wanted to talk to them about. She asks if Yuki and Cecilia could take her and the guardian god with them to Minerva. The gargoyle was very surprised by the girl's request. She bowed and asked once more. She said that healing magic wouldn't be able to help the guardian god, but maybe they could find help in Minerva. Yuki thought that it would be easy to gather information about everything in Minerva. The young man asks what Cecilia thinks. The girl says that, to be honest, that it is impossible. Till has not fully recovered yet, and it will be very difficult to bring a gargoyle into the city. Yuki tells Cecilia that he has come up with something. After a while, Yuki tells everyone his plan. Cecilia thinks it over carefully and says that if you think about it, then maybe everything will turn out well. Yuki says that everything is fine. Till begins to rejoice and throws himself on the neck of the gargoyle and says that it's all very beautiful. The gargoyle, in turn, waited for everyone to wait because he hadn't agreed yet. The demon was embarrassed and agreed, and Yuki and Cecilia, who were watching all this, whispered that the gargoyle could not say no to Till. After finishing all the chores, Cecilia, Till, and Sheik left the village. They have lived here for about a week, so they will miss this place. Then Cecilia noticed Yuki loading a statue onto the carriage. She decided to ask the young man about it, to which he replied that it was a gargoyle. With his magic, he turned the gargoyle into a statue. Thiel is being treated, so she will work and live in the Aquarin family mansion. Celia only asked the girl not to overwork, but Till was happy and said that cleaning was a common thing for her. Yuki then turned to Celia and said that he would like to keep this statue in their mansion. The woman refused. She told Yuki that if he wanted to keep the statue, it had to be very beautiful. Yuki realized that was what he thought, but Thiel wouldn't beg for a gargoyle. That's why the young man left the gargoyle at home. After a while, Duke, who kicked the door down, and Happens, who was standing next to Yuki, burst into the room. Both girls were calling the captain. Entering the room, Duke turned to the young man and asked where the bad man who upset Sheik was. Yuki was scared by the unexpected appearance of the girls. They stood there looking menacing. Duke said they would kill the man, and Happens added that they would do it with extreme brutality. Yuki put his hands in front of him and asked the girls to wait. He asked them who had told them about it. They said they wanted to celebrate Sheik's return, but he was very sad and told them everything himself. Yuki asked everyone to calm down and said that he had taken care of everything and had already broken a couple of bones, and then thrown them into the river. Duke told the captain that it was too soft. It was necessary to break all his bones and only then throw him into the sea. Happens added that this man had to be crushed. Yuki mentally asked the girls not to say such cruel things. He said he had already beat him up anyway. Then the young man asked about the girls' work. Duke said they'd be back quickly, and Yuki screamed and asked if they were really going to quit their jobs. Duke objected to the captain and asked that Sheik was very worried about this. Yuki thought that no matter how much he told him, it wouldn't do any good. Then he said that Cecilia would definitely be able to do something. She can calm him down easily, and she definitely won't leave him if she sees that he's depressed. Duke confirmed it. Yuki asked to trust Cecilia, and Happens agreed with him. Then Duke changed the subject, turning to the captain, and all the while she wanted to ask him what it was. The girl pointed her finger at the statue. She said that, to be honest, this statue is very scary and does not fit this room. Duke offered to throw it away, and Happens called this statue just garbage. The gargoyle heard everything at that moment. He was shaking with anger, and then he appeared in his real form and said that he didn't like this form either. Duke immediately drew her sword, and Happens began to cast a spell. Yuki asked all of them to stop immediately and stop fighting. If something breaks, then who will pay for it all? After a while, Yuki and the gargoyle talked about everything. Duke realized the situation and apologized to the gargoyle for pulling out the sword. She introduced herself and said that she was a Doulahan and Happens was a harpy. The gargoyle said he didn't have a name, but he was very pleased to meet the girls. Duke said it was very inconvenient that there was no name. Then Happens suggested calling him Gaius. Duke said it sounded like a man's name and sounded really cool. The gargoyle told them to call him whatever they wanted. Yuki thought that they had become friends very quickly, and that was a good thing. Duke then asked Guy if it was really the captain who did this to him. It's just awful, and Happens added that it's tasteless. Guy said he thought so too, but there was nothing he could do. Yuki would have already started to get angry and asked the guys to stop, but suddenly he heard a knock on the door. He quickly turned around and used magic on Guy. Sophia came into the room. The girl said that Happens was here after all. Yesterday, she instructed her to take care of the new girl. The girl looked at Happens with a threatening look and said that she shouldn't have time for entertainment. The girl was scared. Then Sophia dragged Happens with her, and the girl begged the boss to forgive her. Sophia then turned to Yuki and apologized for being annoying, but asked about the statue. Raven suddenly appeared behind Sophia. He turned to Duke and said that today he would go to Daga's village to get those bandits, so he was waiting for Duke. Raven also turned to Yuki and said that if he had time, he could also come and participate in their assignment. Yuki agreed and waved at the young man. Then Sophia turned to them and said that she was all about this statue, and it would be better to throw it away. Guy turned to the young man and asked him what he had turned him into now. Yuki replied that he thought the Sphinx was a good idea. He realizes that he has been reborn in this world, and suddenly the feeling of beauty here is much different. He then informs Guy that he is heading to the guild, as he has not been there for a long time. Guy shouts after him and asks if he really wants to leave him like this. After a while, Yuki comes to the Adventurers Guild but does not see Clayman here. He turns to the receptionist girl. The girl recognizes the main character and says that he is the one who often talks to the Vice Guild Master. Yuki doesn't understand who she's talking about, so he asks the girl who she's talking about. Yuki was puzzled when the girl repeated once again that the young man often talked with Clayman, who is a Vice Guild Master. The girl asked if the young man was okay, to which he replied that he was fine and then apologized. He just thought that Clayman didn't look like a Vice Guild Master. The receptionist laughed and said that she understood the young man very well. Even though she says so, Clayman does the job completely. When she joked about a vacation for the entire guild on the day of the heroes' parade, he worked for them for 3 days. Yuki realized that it was when he arrived in the city. Yuki asked the girl what happened to Clayman today. She whispered that it had to do with the honor of the guild, so she couldn't tell him at the top of her voice. She had heard that Clayman seemed to have quarreled with his wife. He's been in the hospital for a month now. Yuki was very surprised. After a while, Clayman, sitting on the bed in the hospital room, asks Yuki why he came here. Yuki handed him a bag of treats and told him that Clayman was actually here because of the quarrel. He asked what he had done. Clayman said that the quarrel happened because of the wedding anniversary. Yuki said that he understood and assumed that Clayman had simply forgotten about her. The man got angry and said that he remembered about her. Just buying a gift was such a hassle that he kept putting it off for later. On the day of the anniversary, he spent the day frantically searching for a gift, and the night came very quickly, and when he came home, her face was simply terrifying. Yuki shouted out that it was all Clayman's fault, so he should apologize to his wife immediately. Clayman said she wasn't mad anymore, so when work was over, he'd come home. Then Clayman grinned and asked if the young man was really jealous, because his wife looked after him. Yuki was silent for a while, and then he remembered Celia's words when, due to some quarrel, Sophia's husband fully recovered after 6 months. Yuki then asked Clayman what his wife's job was. The man replied that she was a maid in the mansion, and she was the head maid. Yuki asked if Clayman's wife's name was Sophia. The man was surprised that Yuki knew her. The young man replied that he knew a girl from the Aquaran family and she had introduced him to the maids. Yuki then asked how Clayman met Sophia. The man was delighted and asked why the young man was so interested in their love story. He agrees to tell him about it. To begin with, Clayman has been a genius since childhood. Until he was 18, he was a single adventurer of the A rank. It seemed that everything was easy and life was very boring. Then he heard the voice of a girl who held out her hand to him and said that he seemed to be free now. That girl was Sophia. She said that the young man looked very strong and then invited him to join the team. Clayman thought that the girl was very beautiful. He was drunk, so he immediately started hugging, but before he knew it, Sophia beat him up. It was a shock to Clayman that this girl had defeated him so easily. After that, he asked to join her team. Together, they were just incredibly strong. Clayman said they were called an invincible and apathetic couple. Yuki thought that this name was very strange. The man said that the people themselves called them that. At first, they didn't confess their love to each other, but then they gradually fell in love with each other. When they were together, Sophia was extraordinarily beautiful. The man started enjoying life for the first time, so he decided to propose to her. They had dinner at a restaurant. Then Clayman took out his wedding ring and asked the girl if she would marry him. The offer was perfect, so Sophia agreed. However, after the man's next words, she beat him up. He was treated for 6 months. Clayman suggested that Sophia ask for a job as an adventurer. The girl wanted to continue. Clayman just didn't want her to be in danger. He tried to persuade her when she beat him, but still, in the end, the girl agreed. Yuki says that they are now married and happily living together. Clayman rejoices and gives a positive response. Suddenly, the door of the hospital room opens and Sophia enters the room. He gently calls Clayman and says that she has come for him. Sophia notices Yuki and asks him what he is doing here. The young man smiles and says that he met Clayman at the guild, so he decided to check on him. The man beamed with joy because his beloved wife came to check on him. Then Sophia kicked the man in the head and asked which lover he was talking about. Clayman held his head, and Sophia said that the man always calls her by her first name. MKZH China said that he did see what was under the girl's skirt. She agreed. Yuki was surprised by this, but Sophia turned to him and said that Clayman was her husband, so everything was fine. Then she helps the man up. The girl bows and tells Yuki that they are leaving and also thanks him for coming to visit her husband. After a while, the young man comes home and remembers that he was looking at the lovebirds and he was very jealous. He hugged his pillow and thought that he really wanted to see Cecilia. The next day, Yuki was lying on his bed completely exhausted. Guy turned to him in the form of a sphinx statue and asked him to stop, otherwise he was already starting to annoy him. Yuki turns to Gaius, who advises the young man that if he wants to see a girl, he should just go to her. The young man wants to go to the girl, but he can't do it. Cecilia's job is a little more complicated than the young man imagined, so you can't just come to her. The young man was using magic at that moment. Guy asked the young man to stop. However, Yuki still made a work of art out of the gargoyle. He thought that the statue turned out very well. Guy asked if the young man was really bullying him. Then someone knocked on the young man's door. It was Cecilia who asked if the young man was at home. Yuki was very surprised when he heard the girl's voice. He shouted that he was at home and asked to wait for a while. Then he saw Cecilia as well as Hepines behind her. The girl was delighted to see the young man. Yuki was very happy when he saw Cecilia, but then he said that Hepines was with her too. The girl asked why the young man was looking at her. Cecilia apologizes for coming so suddenly and then asked if they were disturbing Yuki. The young man replied that they did not interfere at all. Cecilia came to him by herself, so today will be just wonderful. Then the girls go into the room to the young man. The girls entered Yuki's room. Hepines began to look around the room. Yuki doesn't understand why the girl is acting like this, but suddenly Hepines asked where the gargoyle was now. Yuki pointed to the statue of the artwork and said that it was here. Hepines narrowed her eyes and told Yuki that it was just terrible. But the young man did not understand why the girl did not appreciate his work. The young man asked what Cecilia thought. The girl panicked, and when Yuki said that, in his opinion, it turned out very well, she replied that this statue was quite unusual. Yuki thought they all liked it, but he realized that art is very difficult and they thought the wrong thing about him again. Yuki then moved away from the topic and asked why the two girls were together today. Cecilia replied that it was a day off, so they decided to take a walk. She asked if they would bother Yuki and Guy, but the young man replied that everything was fine. Cecilia continues and says that Shite has been at their estate all the time lately. She asked if he was okay. Then the girl sat down on the bed right next to Yuki. The main character said that Cecilia had noticed anyway, and then added that they owed them so much, so Yuki wondered if Shite had done something wrong. Cecilia said that everything was fine, and her mother brought the young man to the manor herself. Then Cecilia got confused and asked if it was a kidnapping, but Yuki replied that it was Celia, and besides they were neighbors in style, so it was okay. Yuki then asked if Shite had recovered, but Cecilia replied, apologizing that she was busy and rarely at home, so she didn't know. Hepines interrupted them and said she could tell them everything. It seems that Celia has noticed that the Sheik has changed a lot. When she arrived at the manor, she asked him what had happened to him. Sheik was very talented and had never lost to anyone. However, after losing the first time, he didn't know what to do, so it was very difficult and bad for him. And Celia hugged him while he said everything that boiled over. He cried until he fell asleep, and after that he started spending the night at the manor. It seems to happen that he even felt much better. Cecilia smiled and said that her mom was just great. She also has a healing job, so she respects her mom very much. Yuki smiled and thought about how Celia was able to heal Shika's heart. Hepines added that Cecilia was able to heal the girl's heart. Yuki said that she should have told about it earlier. She shouldn't say that because it sounds like she's some kind of kidnapper. Yuki said that he wanted to talk to Cecilia about Sheik. The girl was surprised. He says that Celia has become much closer to her mother. However, he is confident that everything will be fine and Celia will cope with this role. Cecilia smiled and agreed with the young man. Then the young man changed the subject and said that his friend had been discharged from the hospital yesterday. He turned out to be the husband of Sophia, the head maid of the estate where Cecilia lives. The girl was just as surprised as Yuki was when he found out about it. Yuki clenches her fist and thinks about how this claimant is married now. She's so jealous of him and he's having a good time right now anyway. Cecilia smiled and said that she had also heard that Sophia had gone to see her husband, although he was initially admitted to the hospital because she beat him up. Sophia said that she spent their anniversary alone, so he got paid for it. Cecilia turned to Hepines and asked her if the girl had seen the head maid today. Hepines responded positively and added that it was very scary. She starts to tremble and says Sophia was smiling. The young man thought that the girl was probably feeling well, but what had scared Hepines so much about Sophia's smile. Yuki said that he doesn't want to listen to Clayman and Sophia's love stories anymore. He is very interested in the time when they were both adventurers. Cecilia said that her mother had told her about it, and Yuki asked her to tell him in more detail. Cecilia began the story. That was before Sophia and Clayman started dating each other. Sophia was always uncomfortable creating teams. She had been in various teams before, but they didn't suit her completely. They often quarreled with her and constantly dismissed the teams for any reason. They also went on difficult assignments, and because of this, her teammates often suffered serious injuries because of this. Sophia felt constantly guilty. However, only Clayman complained about everything, but did not leave her side a single step. One day, a girl said that if everything annoyed him, they could disband the team. Clayman was surprised and stated that he was annoyed by the task itself, but not annoyed by Sophia, so he refused to dismiss the team. It seems that from that moment on, Sophia fell in love with Clayman. Yuki clutched his head and said it looked like a love story. Cecilia started giggling. Then she remembered something else. While Mr. Clayman was not getting up from his seat, Sophia was being molested by other men because the girl was very nice. Suddenly, Clayman interrupted them and asked what to do. He scratched his head and said it looked like other people were hitting on the girl. He called Sophia to go to another bar as there was nothing he could do about it, and suddenly a man stopped Clayman and yelled at him not to ignore him. He apologized to the man and then sat him down and said it was time to stop. Then the unknown man put his hand on the girl's shoulder, and then Sophia kicked the man with a U-turn, and he flew to the other end of the bar. Everyone was horrified when they saw what this couple was capable of. Since then, this couple has been called unwavering. After coming to another bar, Clayman said that it was a problematic day, but the time spent with Sophia was priceless for him. Yuki grabbed his head again and said it was those annoying love stories again. Cecilia laughed awkwardly again. Then the girl said that she noticed that Happens had fallen asleep. The young man looked at the sleeping girl and thought about when she managed to climb onto the bed. Cecilia said she thought it was time for them to go. Then she woke up Happens. Cecilia says that they will go, and then she adds that the young man will not refuse her to visit Clarence Castle together. Yuki asked what this meant, but Cecilia replied that she hoped for the young man and then said goodbye to him. A few days later, the main character really had to go to the castle. He was surprised by how huge this castle was. Yuki asked why they were called to this castle. Cecilia replied that she would explain everything now. Yuki looked at his happy face and thought that the old sheik was back. Cecilia said that the three of them went to Daga's village. Yuki says it happened. The girl continues and says that she has reported this to Clarence Castle. There's nothing wrong with subduing the bandits and treating the villagers. She didn't mention any information about Guy, so there's no question about that either. Yuki assumes that one thing remains, namely that it's all about this terrible hero from another country. Yuki noticed Shik's concern, so he put his hand on the young man's head to somehow comfort him. Shik smiled and said that everything was fine and he was already fine. He decided that he would become even stronger and would not lose to anyone else. Besides, he promised Celia that as soon as he gets stronger, he will beat this hero with all his might. Cecilia giggled, and Yuki smiled awkwardly and thought about the strange expression on the young man's face. Cecilia then exhaled and said that, just like Yuki said, it was about the hero from the Garis Empire. He was actually snooping around their kingdom, but that wasn't the main problem. It lies in how they managed to defeat him. According to the official version, they used various weapons, cornered him, and eventually dumped him into the river. The girl hands the report to Yuki so that he can look at it himself. In addition, the report contains information about a sword that absorbs magic, so it immediately becomes clear that the girl alone would not have defeated it. It seems that they suspected something, that's why they were called to the castle. Yuki says that it turns out they need to keep their mouths shut, and their main problem now is the young man she and Cecilia have turned on. Sheik stood there and didn't understand why these two were looking at him. Cecilia turned to Sheik in a panic and asked him to be careful. Yuki ordered him to listen carefully and in no case stir up anything unnecessary. Sheik said he understood everything. After a while, the three of them came to an audience at the royal castle. They were met by a man who introduced himself as Prince Clarence Alter. He is also the current king of Clarence. Yuki, Sheik, and Cecilia were kneeling to the king. The man laughed and said that, although it was too formal, but is it possible to speak normally already? The girl who was standing next to the king said that he shouldn't do that because he was the king, so he had to behave appropriately. The girl's name was Sylvia. The prince laughingly asked her not to be too gloomy. Yuki thinks that he has heard that, thanks to his talent, the third prince was able to achieve great military successes in just 15 years. And at the age of 25, he has already ascended to the royal throne. The young man knew that he was young, but still imagined him somehow differently. Cecilia had a face like she was already used to it, so the young man thought that this was happening all the time. Looking at Shika, Yuki realized that he had fallen asleep. Sylvia turned to the king and said they could continue the audience. The prince laughed and apologized to the girl because he suddenly plunged into the world for the two of them. The king turns to Yuki, Shika, and Cecilia and says that he called them here because of what happened in Daga's village. There's no particular problem with the report itself, but there's something he doesn't understand. He turns to Cecilia Aquarine from the Hero Squad. Even though the girl was there, but is their company really capable of standing up to the hero of the Garis Empire? He says that Yuki, who accompanied the girl, is just an adventurer with a rank, and nothing is known about that boy at all. At that moment, Yuki was trying to wake Shika up. The king says he wants to find out what the young man is capable of. He asks if Sheik would mind fighting Sylvia right now. Suddenly, the young man jumps up and says he doesn't mind. Sylvia threateningly pulls out her sword and suggests that we start right away. She makes a horizontal swing, but Sheik jumps up and dodges. The king smiles and says it's very good. Then the girl makes another swing, but Sheik jumps up and twists in the air. In the next attack, the girl swings her sword from top to bottom, but the young man twists several times in the air and bounces off the girl. The girl puts away her sword, and then says that Sheik moves well and is very capable for his age. The king agrees and says that he will believe Cecilia, Shika, and Yuki. Cecilia is very nervous and thanks the king. He laughs and asks the girl to relax because he knew it from the very beginning. The knights reported everything to him and they also checked the battlefield. Besides, if they had lost, they obviously wouldn't have come here on their own 2 feet. He just decided to prank them. Cecilia was shaking with shame and resentment. The man asked her not to be offended. He said that they had performed well in the village, so we need to come up with a reward for them. That's why he called them here. Yuki thought about the reward. That word was very sweet. He thought that the award was very wonderful, and in his mind he imagined Cecilia. He was daydreaming and said he wanted Cecilia to be his girlfriend. Cecilia herself was very surprised by Yuki's words, and it was then that the main character realized that he had said all this out loud. The words that Yuki wants Cecilia to become his girlfriend spread throughout the castle. Darts, Sylvia, and Sheik looked at Yuki in shock. The young man realized that he had accidentally said his thoughts out loud. He was very curious how Cecilia would react to this. The main character turns towards the girl and sees her surprised face. Then she closes her eyes and looks at Yuki with an intimidating look. The young man realized that he was finished. Suddenly, Sylvia screamed that Yuki was a real scoundrel. His Highness said that he should choose the reward, and the young man dares to say such shameful things. Yuki was startled by the girl's screams. He doesn't know what to do, so he looked towards Sheik, who was laughing and clutching his stomach, and also at Cecilia, who was covering her face with her hand. Suddenly, Yuki heard laughter from the side. The king asked if the whole situation wasn't interesting. The young man did not understand what the king was talking about, but he thought it meant that he was saved. Cecilia turns to the young man and says that when they return, he must be prepared for the consequences. It seemed to Yuki that he was not saved. The king laughed and said that Cecilia and Yuki seemed to be getting along great. Yuki asked if it really seemed that way from the outside. The king was about to continue talking about the young man's reward, but Yuki interrupted him. He asked the man to forget about what he had said, and explained it by saying that he got nervous and blurted out something he shouldn't have. The main character was so impressed that he lost his head. The king said he didn't know they had such an interesting guy in their kingdom. If he had met him earlier, he would have included him in the heroes group. Yuki said that it would be too much because he was from the rank. Then the king turned to Yuki and said what he wanted to say about his request. He apologizes and says that it is impossible not to take into account the opinion of Aquarin. Yuki realized that the king was feeling guilty. He asked him not to feel guilty, and Cecilia thinks that she did not think that she would ever hear such a thing from the king. Then the man turns to Cecilia Aquarin and asks what kind of award the girl would like. Cecilia says she doesn't need anything. The fact that she can serve the kingdom is already a reward for her. The man said that the girl's loyalty to the kingdom was truly wonderful. Including her in the heroes group was the right decision. He asked if the other members of the group were in good health. Cecilia confirms this and says that everyone has returned to their usual lives. According to the girl, Yuga became involved in foreign policy as well as the destruction of A-rank monsters. Mikana also received the prestigious position of court witch, and Raven became the captain of the castle knights. Cecilia became a wandering priestess to help other people. Each of them may have gone their own way, but we can say that they are united in their aspirations. The king hopes that they will continue to serve for the benefit of this country. The girl agrees. Then the man says that he almost forgot. He turns to Sheik and asks what he would like as a reward. The young man thought for a while and then said that he would like a lot of sweets. After a while, Yuki, Cecilia, and Sheik return home. Yuki looks at the happy guy. The main character thinks that they were summoned to the castle to eventually return with a basket of sweets. It's good that the King of Darts turned out to be such an open person. He also told them that if they had time, they could come again. However, this young man is even more shameful. Then Cecilia calls him and says that she has a conversation and would the young man come to visit her. Yuki shudders and agrees. Sheik says goodbye to the girl and Yuki and says that he will go and share sweets with the others. The main character was thinking that being alone with his girlfriend in her room was just a wonderful feeling. This is the kind of situation where a guy can't find his place with excitement. That's just not the situation right now because Cecilia was just very intimidating. The girl approaches Yuki and asks if there is anything to tell him. The young man immediately falls at the girl's feet and says he has something to say. Then he apologizes to her. Cecilia asks how the young man thinks, for which he apologizes. Yuki replies that he confessed to her in the audience. It was incredibly horrible. The girl agrees with the boy. She asks him not to think that she hates him, but to talk about such a thing in a public place is really incredibly terrible. Yuki is surprised and thinks that the girl is really crying. He apologizes to her. Then he thinks that just thinking about the award turned his head at that moment. Cecilia says they have something else to discuss. The young man agrees. Suddenly, Celia came into the room and asked Cecilia if she was back now. Then the woman saw a strange stop and asked Yuki and Cecilia what was going on here. The girl told her mom about everything. The woman realized that Yuki had behaved very badly. She asked if it was possible to confess to a girl in such an environment. There's no atmosphere there at all. Cecilia told her mother that she had misunderstood everything. The woman asked if Yuki knew that it was necessary to choose the time and place carefully for such a thing. She screams about whether the young man understands that with such an attitude Cecilia can be taken away by another man. She asks if it's normal for a young man to realize this. Yuki shouted that he would never allow this. He hates the thought of Cecilia marrying someone else. If that happens, he's even willing to use the power of a demon. Celia giggled and asked if the young man was really thinking about how he would destroy the other guy. The young man began to deny all this. The woman said it was good that he was reacting like this, and Cecilia added that it was absolutely useless. The woman replied that all this proves the sincerity of the young man's feelings. Yuki scratched his head and said it wasn't even enough. Cecilia said she thought the young man was really thinking about something strange, but Yuki denied it all. Celia giggled and said that Yuki and Cecilia really looked good together. A slight blush immediately appeared on both of their cheeks. The woman thought that it seemed that Yuki was really serious about Cecilia. She thinks that they will make a really good couple. Yuki wished Cecilia to be careful at this moment. She sighed and agreed. Celia wondered what Yuki was thinking right now, and then announced that Yuki wouldn't be able to see Cecilia for a whole month from now on. He should learn how to behave with girls. The young man began to panic and asked Celia to give him at least 2 weeks, but the woman refused the young man. Cecilia said that it seems to her that the main character has already thought enough about his behavior, so he won't do it anymore. Celia smiled and asked if the girl couldn't stand it for a month. Cecilia was confused and couldn't find the words. The woman smiled and said that she would shorten the deadline to 2 weeks. It was after that time that the young man would be able to see Cecilia. This can strengthen their relationship. The young man stood on the street and thought that this breakup could somehow strengthen their relationship. He thinks crying won't help his grief. The young man recalled how Celia ordered Sophia to take him out of the manor. He thought that Cecilia's smile at that moment was so kind that tears welled up in his eyes. The young man accepted for himself that he would never give up. When they meet Cecilia again, their relationship will really become stronger. Someday he would confess his feelings to her again. After a while, the young man opens his eyes and sees that he has acquired a demonic form. He was trying to figure out what this place was and where he was. Then someone called his name and Yuki saw Cecilia. The girl asked him if he was really the Yuki she knew because now he looks very strange. The girl says that she admits that she did it. The young man is surprised, but his demonic appearance disappears. Cecilia asks if the young man has remembered something, but Yuki says, apologizing, that his brain is no longer working at all and he does not understand anything. The girl holds out her hand to the young man and invites him to come with her. Yuki takes her hand and asks where they will go. Cecilia stands in the middle of a field of flowers and then comes up to the young man and clings to him. He addresses her by her first name. The young man looks at the girl and then asks her to marry him. She says yes. Then the girl offers to close their lips in a kiss. The young man is very surprised. He says her name and then suddenly wakes up, kissing the pillow. Yuki was silent for a moment. Guy in the form of a statue was also silent. Then the young man cried out that it was just a dream and his rich imagination. He covered his face with his hands and thought about why Cecilia agreed at that moment. This dream has been haunting him since they broke up 2 weeks ago. Then the young man abruptly turned around and looked at Guy. He grabbed him and asked if he was really sending the young man such dreams. The gargoyle did not understand anything that Yuki said so that he would not be a fool, because he could not believe that this dream appeared at such a time. This is very ridiculous, and you need to pull yourself together. Yuki then transforms Guy into an incomprehensible sculpture. He sits down and asks Guy to forgive him. He had a very sad day yesterday and now he doubts everything. Guy asked why he was being disfigured again, and the young man smiled awkwardly and apologized again, because he just upset Cecilia. The gargoyle replied that he wasn't interested in human relationships, so he couldn't accept his excuses. Yuki tells Tom that he is not a good person and is about to leave. Guy started shouting that he had actually heard everything, no matter who was saying what, but Yuki replied that he didn't know anything. Yuki then decides to ask Clayman for advice. He comes to the Adventurers Guild and the man says that's the way it is. It's better to keep quiet and get a couple of kicks. If the young man is patient, then paradise from the knees can wait for him. Yuki says he shouldn't have even thought about asking Clayman for advice. The man asks what he said wrong. to which the young man replied that it could only work for him and Sophia, and it would not help him in any way. Then the young man feels a hand on his shoulder. He turns around and asks Raven about his day off. The young man awkwardly starts asking Yuki about what happened to him. The young man thinks that Raven is more a man of reason than feelings. He says he wants to discuss something with him and asks if the young man has any free time. Raven asks about Yuki's request that he wants to discuss something with him. Yuki says he wants to ask the young man something if he doesn't mind. Raven begins to rejoice and says that he does not know if he will help the young man, but he will try very hard because they are friends. The main character thinks it's really very cute, and then suggests that he move to another place because it's kind of crowded. After a while, they come to Yuki's room. Raven looks at the gargoyle and asks the young man if he really got a new statue. He examines it and says that this statue is very good. Yuki was very surprised that someone liked his work of art. He was sure that he had created something incomprehensible. Raven looked at the young man who was staring at him and asked if he had said something incomprehensible. Yuki said that everything was fine, but in his mind he thought that he did not understand this strange world. The young man then declares that he wanted to talk to Raven about love advice. The young man is surprised that Yuki wants to talk to him about it. He says that, to be honest, he doesn't have confidence in himself, so he doesn't know if Yuki should talk to him about it. Yuki suggested that the young man at least try to listen. Summing up after Yuki's story, Raven said that, in general, he angered a loved one by saying something at the wrong moment, and at the next meeting he wants to show decent behavior. Yuki was surprised that Raven would seriously worry about such a thing. He considers the young man to be a real handsome man, albeit with a sweet voice. Suddenly, Raven offers to give something as an apology. Yuki thinks about the gift and realizes that the pendant is from their last date, which turned into a real commotion. As a result, they were never able to buy it. Yuki is happy and tells Raven that this is a great idea. On the last date, there was something they couldn't buy. Raven's expression darkened. Yuki asked him what happened, to which the young man replied that Yuki was already going on a date with his girlfriend, and their relationship was going further and further. Compared to him, Raven is just insignificant. Yuki realizes that their relationship with Hepines doesn't seem to have progressed at all. Then Yuki has an idea. He asks Raven about going shopping for gifts together. Raven asks if he really should go. Yuki replies that he can make a gift for Hepines. Although Hepines is not the one who shows emotions, but the things she likes are dear to her. This will also be an excuse for a meeting. Raven smiles and makes it clear that he likes this gift-buying idea. Yuki asks if that's the case, why do they keep wasting time? He invites the young man to go with him. Raven agrees. After a while, they come to the accessories store. Raven was in disguise, but there were a lot of couples walking around the store. Raven awkwardly whispered to Yuki and asked why they were in such a hurry to make a decision, because he also wanted to go home. Yuki said that he understood the young man, but it was too late to back down. Since they have come, then you need to go and choose the gifts. Raven agrees and then starts choosing jewelry carefully. Yuki looked at Raven, who was thinking carefully about choosing a gift. Suddenly, a consultant approached him and asked if she could help the young man with the search. Raven takes out a piece of paper and writes that Uma needs a hair ornament. The girl asks about the hair ornament, and when Raven nods in response, she points in the right direction and asks him to come with her. Yuki thinks about how Raven carries a pen and paper so she doesn't have to talk to people. At this point, Raven is surprised and says it's beautiful. He was looking at a beautiful rose-shaped hairpin made of white feathers. Yuki thought that Raven had finally decided to take the feather ornament. He picked up what was needed for Hepines. Now it was his turn to choose a piece of jewelry. He looked at the pendant that he and Cecilia couldn't buy last time and said it was very good that it was still available. Finally, they bought great gifts and left the store with beautiful bags with roses on them. Suddenly, Raven was called by someone from the side. It was Miki. The girl turned to the swordsman once more and said that she remembered that they were on the same team. It seems that there was also a priest with them. She grins and asks why two guys are suddenly in such a store. The girl is already beginning to speculate, but she is interrupted by Yuki, who asks what the girl is thinking about. He said they just came to pick out presents, that's all. The girl asks who they decided to choose the gifts for. Yuki was about to say that it was for his beloved Cecilia, but Raven stops him and tells him to shut up. Miki giggles and says that she always knew that the swordsman's target was their priest, but it looks like she was mistaken. Raven felt awkward. Comparing with Yuuga, who unknowingly gathered crowds of girls around him because he couldn't just leave the friendliness of the girls. Raven was someone who didn't just avoid girls, he avoided any people at all. That was the whole swordsman of the hero's team. She looked at Raven carefully, and then sighed and said that, as usual, you won't get a word out of his mouth. Then she apologizes for that. namely for laughing at the young man's voice the first time they were in the same group. Yuki looks at the girl and thinks that she was laughing at Raven's voice too. He realizes that he remembers something like that. However, it seems that she is truly remorseful. Then they hear a strange sound. Yuki tries to figure out what it was, and then he and Raven look at the confused Mikin. The girl asked them what they needed, and if they really couldn't be hungry anymore. Yuki says that there is nothing like that, and on that note they will probably go. Suddenly, Mikin stops the young man and says that she hasn't talked enough yet, so they go to a restaurant. Yuki was indignant and asked why the girl was deciding for them. Raven replied that it was useless. If Mikin wanted something, then so be it. After a while, they came to the restaurant. Yuki was thinking that they just went out to buy a gift, so why did it happen like that? She looked at the menu and talked about the luxurious atmosphere here. And the waiters are friendly and the food is top class. Raven then starts whispering to Yuki and asks him that the one he likes is Cecilia. He could tell by his face when Mikin asked about the gift. Yuki agrees and says it's her. Raven then starts shaking and says that Yuki has angered Cecilia herself. Yuki whispered to Raven to stop because it's not the most important thing right now. He has to think about how they can get rid of Mikin's questions, so they need a plan. The waitress approaches Makana and asks what they will order. Yuki rips out the menu and tells the girl to bring them everything that is written here. Mikin tried to stop them and asked them how much they were going to eat today. Yuki replied that they were hungry and that men actually needed to eat a lot. Mikin said she didn't really care. I ordered a light cocktail for myself. At this moment, the young men were devouring their ordered food. Mikin said it looked like they weren't going to talk to her. Yuki grinned and thought about how he wouldn't be able to chat while eating. That was his and Raven's plan. Mikin sighed and said that she wanted to chat about interesting stories with Cecilia. Yuki immediately drank a glass of water and then asked Mikin to continue. The girl grinned and said that the young man should listen to his stories first. She asked the young man how he was doing with the priest Cecilia. Yuki said he wouldn't call it a promotion. Mikin says that Cecilia is a priest who belongs to the heroes group, and she went with a young man, the most ordinary person on a date, and he says that he has no promotion. Yuki says there are some reasons for that. Mikin sighs and says that Yuga usually did things that could anger the priest. Yuga could go into the priest's room while she was changing clothes, and in the communal bathroom they bumped into each other at a very inappropriate time. Yuki got angry and asked where the hero was now. He started using magic and said he would kill this hero. Mikin stopped him and asked him to calm down. Not only does the hero have a lot of girls, but he is also lucky to see Cecilia in all sorts of different ways. Mikin said that she was still talking, so the young man should keep quiet. At that time, Cecilia was still gently scolding him, but the worst was that time. Yuga unknowingly charmed the girls in the towns and villages he stayed in during his travels. He couldn't stay in one village or town for more than 3 days. The girls came to his hotel uninvited. The hero was too kind to refuse to let them in. No matter how much Mikin warned him, he still made appointments with girls, and this interfered with the trip. And it was then, after a significant delay in travel plans, that the limit came. Cecilia turned to the hero. She said he was too careless with women. This was followed by a lecture that lasted about 2 hours. Just because she's always nice doesn't mean that a priest can't be angered. If that happens, it will be scary. Then Mikin asks if the young man wants to hear about the swordsman now. Yuki is happy and says that he is very sorry because Raven is still eating. He turns to Raven, who shows him a piece of paper that says he can't eat anymore. Yuki whispers to the young man if he's okay. Raven says that it is very difficult for him to eat because of the thought that Mikin will talk about him and happens, namely about their awkward moments. Besides, he's just shy. The young man looks at Raven and then slams his fist on the table and shouts that he will protect Raven's innocent love. Mikin gets angry and says that the young man talks like she's being mean here. Yuki asks if that's not true. The girl says she thought she could help the two of them, but in the end she couldn't do anything. She starts to get embarrassed and says that besides, the relationship between him and Yuga has not been the warmest lately. She thought she would tell them about it and they would give her some advice. Yuki thought that they were here for a consultation on problems in life. Although they can distract Mikin from Raven by doing so, Yuki asks the girl what exactly is bothering her. Mikin says that Yuga doesn't talk to her like before anymore. She couldn't have noticed his indifference to her, and she knows exactly why. The girl turns to the swordsman and says that he knows about it too. Raven tenses up. It seemed to Yuki that the conversation was getting heavier. Mikin asked if Yuki would definitely not tell anyone about this. He promises he won't do it. Raven nods and Mikin realizes that Raven seems to trust him too, then she will tell him. This information has not been officially published. However, they had been defeated many times in the Demon Lord's castle. Yuki gets a big shock and realizes that he already knew about it. The girl says it's not because of the demon lord. That reason was because of the middle-class demon of the demon lord's castle. Yuki asks if this is true but thinks to himself that he knows this too, since this guy was him too. Mikin says that that demon was strong. She doesn't even know where such a demon came from in the demon king's castle. Yuki thinks it's not good. The girl continues and says that moreover they were completely defeated. When they were defeated, they were ready to die, but before they knew it, they suddenly found themselves in a village nearby. This demon even kindly healed the wounds he received in battle. Yuki was surprised and said that this opponent turned out to be quite kind. Mikin said it was very humiliating. He showed that there was such a huge difference between them that he took pity on them. Yuki says that in the end they were able to turn the demon lord. That's not bad. The girl agrees and Yuki feels a very tense atmosphere. Mikin says that the young man is right, but when he hears what she says next, he will most likely get mad at her because he loves Cecilia so much. The girl says that this demon has imposed his conditions on them. He would have let them pass only if they had left the priest there. Mikin was the one who convinced everyone else to accept these conditions. The young man was surprised by this. Raven turned to Yuki and told him not to blame her for this as it was also his fault. He couldn't find any other way out. Of course, the young man is surprised by something else, because of him, the relationship between Yuga and Mikin is coming apart at the seams. The young man set such conditions to confess to Cecilia. To be honest, he feels guilty. However, he is now an outsider who is in love with Cecilia and knows nothing. Yuki asks if they really didn't care even if she died. Mikin started screaming that of course not. This fight should never have been so risky. They once encountered the Demon King in front of his castle. They knew his power. They analyzed everything they had learned from previous opponents and believed they could win. And they, the people of Clarence, felt that victory was already in their hands, and then he appeared. Who knew that the Demon King had such a trump card up his sleeve? Yuki realizes that he can't tell them that he was just a recluse. People have never doubted victory. However, not only did they not win, but they also lost to some unknown demon, so the girl couldn't talk about it. It was necessary to maintain people's trust in the hero's team. It was also necessary to preserve the good name of Yuga, and when the failure of the team became known, Yuga would be the first to be hit. Defeats followed one after another, and after a month they ran out of excuses. One day, Mikin was told that there were some strange heroes in their country. Mikin wanted to protect Yuga, and then a demon appeared with his proposal. The girl couldn't help but smile because this was their chance. If they lose again, it will be the end of everything. This thought has been nagging her, but it's just an excuse. She was ready to leave Cecilia after everything they had been through together. Even if she could have been killed, her regret probably means that she feels guilty. Yuki watched carefully and then listened to what happened to Cecilia. The moment the Demon King fell, Mikin wondered what was wrong with Cecilia. She immediately rushed to the girl's aid. As soon as they defeated the Demon King, Mikin rushed back to Cecilia without regard for her own fatigue. When she saw Cecilia, the girl smiled sweetly and praised Mikin. The girl realized that Cecilia was unharmed. Cecilia also said that she was very glad that the girl was safe and sound. Mikin couldn't rest and thought about what Cecilia was saying. She said that the girl was not injured and then fell unconscious. That's how she fainted. The girl couldn't say anything to Cecilia, no apologies, no thanks. She only wanted to protect her lover, but now she owes Cecilia and he seems to have moved away. Yuki asks what the girl thinks after thinking about it, and if everything is okay now. Mikin agrees and says it can't go on like this. The girl says she has to go, so she thanks them for listening to her. Yuki and Raven feel kind of sad, and then realize that it's time for them to go too. After some time, the young man is in his room and says that 2 weeks will finally pass tomorrow. He had been looking forward to this day so much. A young man looks in the mirror. He looks at his reflection and thinks that it is a pity, but no one can defeat the young man and he will perish in a scarlet flame. Today is anyone's worst day. At the same time, the main character looks very arrogant. Yuki was proud that he had a wonderful spirit and could say beautiful words. Then Guy turned to him and asked what kind of circus the young man had organized here. Yuki turned around, blushed all over, and screamed in horror. Then he ran out of the room, and Guy did not understand why the young man behaved like that. The young man covered his red face with his hands and said that the thought of meeting Cecilia tomorrow had completely carried him away, and he had completely forgotten about Guy. He wondered when Guy even slept. When he opened his eyes, he saw Till, who was carrying a bag behind her. The girl greeted the young man and said that they had not seen each other for a long time. The young man agrees with Till that they haven't seen each other for a long time and then asks her what she needs. The girl says that a lady told the young man to come to the mansion tomorrow. Yuki was surprised and asked if the girl had really come to thank her. Then he turns to Till and asks what it is behind her back. The girl replies that these are books. The young man asks about the books, but the girl agrees. Yuki looks at her pleased face. The young man replied that he was going to leave here, but could Till please come to Guy. Thiel agrees and thanks the young man. She is very happy. So far, the young man cannot return home and he does not want to. He took the money, so he's hanging around the streets. Then the young man notices one bakery and thinks that it has very tasty cupcakes. The young man comes in and thinks that the saleswoman is a young girl. The young man is greeted by a huge and muscular man. Yuki was very surprised by this. The young man approached the man and asked where the former saleswoman was. The man replied that his sister had overworked, so her brother was on the substitute. Then the man puts cupcakes in the bag for Yuki and apologizes for overdoing it and slightly crushing the cupcakes. The young man thanked the man and then looked at the crumbled cupcakes and then tasted them and said that they tasted very good. Then a series of failures followed. The young man accidentally pushed a scary beastman. Then he saw a couple who were laughing at a lonely young man. Then the young man almost stepped into an unpleasant mass on the ground. Yuki realizes that today is clearly his day. Then the young man runs into a little boy who has fallen out kebabs on a stick. The main character bought another portion of kebabs and gave them to the young man. At the same time, he bought one extra. He asked him to be careful in the future, for which the boy thanked him. Yuki sighed. The main character was about to say that today was just a terrible day, but suddenly he felt that someone had stolen something from him, and then he saw a man running away. The young man shouted about why he was so unlucky today that he even bumped into a pickpocket. He ran after him. Then the young man ran into an alley and shouted that the pickpocket would not just leave. He kicked a pickpocket who at that moment collided head-on with another pickpocket. Yuki was surprised that another one popped out. The young man said that it was all good, but now it was more important to find a wallet. Suddenly, someone called out to him. He turned his head and saw Yugo pointing his sword at him. The young man ordered Yuki to return the stolen purse. Yuki said that it was actually his wallet, as it had just been robbed. Yuga understood and said that he did not want to return the purse. In that case, he's going to take it by force. The young man strikes with his sword, but Yuki deftly dodges and asks Yugo to listen to them. After a while, Yuga was already with the city guards. Yuki realized that today was his worst day. The guards turned to Yuki and said that he would tell them everything at headquarters. The main character realized that this was really the worst day in the world. Yuki was sitting in the city guard room and handcuffs were placed on his hands. The young man turned to the guard and said that he had already repeated several times that he had only returned the stolen purse. The male guard asked if the young man was really breaking for the first time. He orders him not to be stubborn and to tell everything. Yuki frowned and said that he wasn't lying, but he was thinking about what he should do now in such a situation. Of course, the hero Yuga will only say what he wants, and in the eyes of others, he will immediately become a villain. Yuki closes his eyes and thinks that things are very bad. Suddenly, Raven walks into the room. The guard shuddered and turned to Commander Raven. Yuki was very surprised when he saw Raven, and the young man carefully looked at the whole situation. Raven showed a piece of paper, and the guard read the text on it, which says that the young man is asking about what happened. Yuki was sitting next to him in silence at the time. The swordsman wrote on paper telling the guard to listen to him carefully. After a while, the male guard saluted and wished Raven and the young man a good day. Then the handcuffs were removed from Yuki, and he waved his hands, glad that he had suffered enough for today. In the course of an honest case, Raven proved that Yuki was not to blame. Eventually, Yuga repented and apologized to the young man. Yuki sighed and said that he only escaped because Raven told him not to apologize for anything. From the window, he saw Yuki being taken to the police station. Raven informs Yuki that he will seriously chastise Yuga and he himself is very sorry. Yuki agrees and says it was very unpleasant. The young man then asks Raven if he's talking to Yuga, but the young man says he's just using a pen and paper. Yuki told Raven that he wouldn't convince many people that way. The young man replied and said that he was coping because once there was an interesting incident at a party. Suddenly, the door opened and Duke was there calling Raven. She said she had heard that the captain was being held captive in the Order of Knights. She was about to ask where he was, but suddenly she noticed Yuki, who was standing next to Raven. The latter squinted in the direction of the main character. Duke glared directly at the captain and told him what he had done because he had broken the law without Cecilia's supervision. Yuki shouted that he had not broken the law. Duke said that she understood, and then said that the only thing she didn't understand was how the young man had managed to let himself be robbed. Yuki was embarrassed and told them not to say a word. Raven was writing something on paper at that moment, sitting at the table. He said that he had overlooked it today. He apologizes to the young man. Then he finishes writing and says that he wrote the remark, and now they can go to Yuga. Yuki thought that this stack of paper in Raven's hands was very big. Duke informed Raven that she was telling him that even if he was a hero or not a hero, it didn't matter. Raven asked Duke to stop because she was already looming so much. Raven then left the room, and Yuki folded his arms and asked Duke for a minute, saying that Raven had hinted that Duke was looming. The girl shuddered and said that this was not the case at all. Yuki then said that Raven is not an ordinary person, but Commander Duke. The girl replied that she obeys only the young man since he is the captain, and in public she calls him Commander. Then someone knocked on the door and asked for forgiveness. They both looked in her direction. A cute girl who looked like an elf walked into the room. Her name was Ilna. The girl turned to Duke and said that she had snuck out of training again. Yuki looked at the girl with disdain. Ilna took Duke's hand and ordered her to follow her. Yuki looked at the girl and noticed her pointed ears. Then he realized that the girl was actually an elf. Yuki didn't know that there were elf knights, and he also thought about Duke not burdening others. Finally, he says it's time for him to go too. After a while, he meets the hero Yuga. The young man was glad that Yuki had finally left the building. The main character looked at hero Yuga with disdain. Yuki turns around and is about to leave, but Yuga grabs his shoulder and asks him to wait. The young man says that he was waiting for the young man. Then he realizes that they have already met since the young man was with Cecilia at the time. Yuki agrees. Yuga says it was so dark in that alley that he didn't recognize him. He asks Yuki to accept his deepest apologies for the situation. The young man asks if Yuki is offended. Yuga himself exuded a heroic aura. Yuki closed his eyes as Yuga was emitting a very strong glow. The main character thinks he's right next to the night unit. He doesn't want to bring more trouble to Raven. The young man said that everything was fine. The hero said whether this is really the case. There is a good restaurant nearby. He asks if the young man will accompany him. Yuki agrees and goes right after the hero. The young man shouted that the hero was being too loud, so he should be more modest. Hugo said he didn't want to be loud. After a while, they came to the restaurant. Yuki thought that this was the same restaurant he had been to with Mikin and Raven back then. Hugo said it was quite spacious and the staff loved what they did. He remembers the words of Mikin, who said that the food and service here are excellent. Yuki thought about what he already knows about everything thanks to Makana. The young man looked at the menu and said that it was all very interesting. Hugo confirmed the young man's words. Then the waitress came up to them. Yuki said he would have a drink from the menu. The girl was surprised that the young man didn't want anything else. The main character agreed and thought that it was because he had eaten so much last time that he was already sick of the food here. Then Hugo interrupted his thoughts and said that he wanted to apologize once again for what had happened earlier. He says he acted very recklessly and that's what it led to. Yuki said that everything was fine and to be honest, he didn't care. Hugo said that as a hero like him, the young man does not understand how he could act so carelessly with an innocent man. Yuki thought that it looked like he was being too cruel to the hero. He says it's okay. Hugo breathed a sigh of relief and then he jumped up and invited the young man to get straight to the point. He asked what was going on between Yuki and Cecilia. Yuki was silent for a moment and then replied that he and Cecilia were just friends. Hugo was shocked and said that it was very bad because Cecilia was friends with the boy. He asks again if there really is nothing between Yuki and Cecilia. Yuki says that if Hugo doesn't believe him, he can ask Raven because they are friends too. There's nothing like that, so Yuki doesn't understand why the hero is so surprised. Hugo is surprised that the young man is also friends with Raven. Yuki agrees. The hero was a little surprised and fell silent. He started thinking about his friends and talking to himself. Yuki looked at him in disbelief. Hugo sat down at the table and became very serious, and then said if he could ask the young man for advice. Yuki wonders why he should be the one giving this advice. Hugo cringes and says that, to tell the truth, he doesn't have any friends at all. Yuki is very surprised and says that this is very bad and he shouldn't have found out about Hugo's pathetic secret. The hero then continues and asks what he should do to get closer to Cecilia. Yuki understands that this is already very bad. He's tensing up. Although the main character told Hugo that he and Cecilia are friends, it doesn't mean that he doesn't have feelings for this girl. Of course, he won't help his opponent. Yuki apologizes and says that he met a girl recently. Compared to the other guys, he's a stranger to her. Therefore, Hugo should be closer to the girl than Yuki, so he should ask someone from the team. Hugo says that Raven probably won't help him since he scolded him just recently. Then the young man shows a huge stack of papers. He says it's the first time he's seen Raven write so much. Yuki thinks that there really are a lot of papers. The hero also says that Mikin is also not an option, since she doesn't care about Cecilia at all. Yuki is surprised by these words of the young man and does not understand why Hugo thinks so. Yuki asks about Makana and says what kind of person she is. Hugo asked if the main character really knows her too. He says that Mikin has been his girlfriend since childhood. Since then, she has always helped the hero. However, she had asked Cecilia once, so he would never be able to forgive her. He asks Yuki if he thinks Mikin is very cruel. He doesn't understand how she could do this to her friend. Yuki got angry and asked Hugo to slow down. Hugo was surprised that the young man suddenly became so serious. Yuki said that she persuaded that demon to accept the deal, but didn't he think about why she did it? He asks if Hugo really thinks that Mikin is the only one who has to bear this burden. Hugo asks how he knows everything. The main character said that Raven and Mikin had recently told him. It turns out that all this time the girl was blaming herself for what had happened. Yuki gets angry and asks Hugo if he knows that Mikin actually cried for days and nights. Hugo was surprised and asked why she felt that way, because it was Mikin who abandoned Cecilia. She's the only one who agreed to the demon's terms, so she's just terrible. Yuki screamed and ordered Hugo to stop saying whatever he wanted. Even Raven felt guilty, but what about the hero himself? Hadn't he ever felt responsible? Hugo shouted that everything was completely wrong and Yuki was mistaken. He's wrong because the hero is not that kind of person. And now Yuki asked him to calm down and answer his question one more time. He asks if the young man really doesn't look like the angel he might seem. Hugo was surprised and tears began to form in his eyes. Yuki realized that things were going badly. Hugo said he was actually the worst. He pinned everything on Mikin and denied any involvement. It was because he couldn't defeat that demon. Yuki realized that Hugo was already in tears. This guy is just a kid. Yuki should have watched her mouth. Yuki turned to the hero and asked him to listen, saying that this was the first time he was experiencing failure and would he just give up now. He must understand that he cannot be happy by constantly denying his share of responsibility. Yuki realized that he had brought the hero himself to tears, but he hoped that nothing would happen to him. Hugo said that Mikin, when she found out that he wanted to become a hero, she began to study magic diligently. When he did something rash, she constantly scolded him. From childhood to the present day, he brings problems to everyone. He doesn't know what to do. Yuki said that if Hugo was acting like this, it was no wonder he was constantly being scolded. Hugo was very surprised by this. The young man says that Mikin is doing this because she cares about the hero, and then asks if he understands this. Hugo was delighted and said that he would immediately go and ask her for forgiveness, and after that he would listen to all her complaints. Yuki told him that he would succeed, and Hugo took the young man by the hand and said that he was still counting on the young man, so he would not go to Makana alone. Yuki was very surprised. After a while, Hugo and Yuki arrived at Mikin's house. Yuki was trying to catch his breath. After that, I asked Hugo if he was really doing this on purpose. He asked where the young man was going so fast. Hugo apologized and said that if he had gone alone, he would not have had the courage. He asks Yuki to wait for him outside. Yuki agrees and Hugo is happy and thanks the young man. The hero then says that he almost forgot that he didn't introduce himself. The young man gives his name, Hugo, and says he is pleased to meet you. Thanks to the young man, he realized his mistake, so he thanked him. The main character gives his name and says that he is also very happy to meet you. It seemed to him that Hugo had moderated his ardor. Hugo already wants to suggest something to Yuki to do next time, but the main character pushes Hugo and tells him to go. So Yuki is the one who caused the conflict between Hugo and Mikin, so now he's the one who helped them reconcile. He thinks it's worth cheering up more often. Then Yuki noticed that the young man hadn't knocked. The next moment, hero Hugo opens the door to Mikin's house, and the girl was changing clothes at that moment. Mikin noticed that Yuki had come into her house. She was embarrassed and screamed. Yuki appeared in the doorway. Mikin was very surprised that Hugo suddenly came to her house and found her at such a moment. Yuki realizes that how could he forget that Hugo is just a lucky guy. At that moment, the hero shouted at Makana not to say anything and just listen to him. The girl asked him to wait because the situation was very awkward. Hugo said that he realized everything, he was too cruel to her. Yuki said that Hugo was simply incorrigible. Hugo kept telling Makana that she was always by his side, supported and helped him with everything. He behaved like a complete egotist. He asked the girl for forgiveness. Mikin was embarrassed and said Yuga's name. The young man said that he knew that simple apologies would not fix anything, but to make her feel a little better, she had to do something. Hugo said that the girl should scold him. Yuki and Mikin were just in shock. Then Mikin got angry, grinned, laughed, and said that the young man had burst in from nowhere while she was changing clothes, and now he was asking her to scold him. She grinned and asked if the young man really likes to endure pain. Hugo was surprised and asked what the girl was talking about. He just wants to make amends. Then the girl grabbed the magic staff and said that she would not even ask permission to scold the young man. She swung and hit the young man. Yuki turned away from them and thought that he should go home, while the two of them continued their fight behind him. Maybe after the anger subsides, they will finally reconcile. After a while, the young man comes home and opening the door notices Till and Gaia there. The girl hugged the statue and told the gargoyle that he looked very cool in this form. Guy asked her not to lean so close. Yuki closed the door and thought about how he had completely forgotten that Till had been here all this time. Till wiped the statue and said she was really sorry. Guy asked her not to bother, because the girl had not fully recovered yet. Till sniffed, lowered her head and agreed with the gargoyle. Guy then told the girl that if he didn't stick to him, he could come to her. The girl was delighted. Yuki exhaled and smiled, and then thought about how he needed to walk a little more so as not to distract Till and Guy. Yuki opened his eyes a crack and saw Cecilia calling his name. She was sitting on the bed next to him. The young man was surprised. The girl took her hair behind her ear and told the young man that she missed him very much, so she ran here as fast as she could. Yuki was surprised and blushed all over, and sweat appeared on his cheeks. He jumped off and screamed, and then found Guy's statue-shaped face next to him. Yuki asked him what he was doing around him. Guy said that the young man had finally woken up. It was a big loss because the dream was just wonderful. Yuki was embarrassed and said that it was all because of Guy, and then asked him why he had sent him such a dream. He was very violent. The gargoyle said that it was because the young man had helped Guy, so he wanted to express his gratitude for that. Yuki remembered how Guy spent time with Till, so he understood what the demon meant when he said thanks. Guy broke into a smile at that moment and said that she really liked his new look, so he used his powers a little for Yuki. Yuki said that sleeping couldn't be considered gratitude at all. Guy replied that he didn't know exactly what kind of dream it was, but he could say with certainty that it wasn't a nightmare. What the young man saw in his dream came from his innermost desires. Yuki covered his face with his hands and blushed, and Guy did not understand why Yuki was behaving like this. The gargoyle said that he just wanted to repay the young man, but it seems that everything did not go according to plan at all. The main character blushed and said what else? He wanted to see Cecilia, but now he's too embarrassed. Then the young man said that it didn't matter. She took the jewelry box for Cecilia and looked in the mirror. The young man stood in a heroic pose and told his reflection to listen carefully. He will remember this day for the rest of his life. Then he slammed the door and set off. Walking through the streets of the city, the young man did not see the rest of the residents and thought that he seemed to have come out a little early. He notices a bakery and thinks that maybe he should go and buy those wonderful cupcakes. Suddenly, someone calls him from the side. A nice girl said she was giving away free cupcakes. He can have one if he wants, because he's already been to their bakery before. The young man was surprised and reached for a bag of cupcakes. The girl said that her brother was very sorry that he had crushed the cupcakes, and to make amends, their bakery was giving them away for free today. The young man understood what the girl was talking about. Then he turns to the girl and her brother and thanks them for the cupcakes. The man stood up in a heroic pose, and Yuki thought that this guy was still the same. Then he notices the beastman. The man turns to the young man and apologizes for staring at him last time. Back then, the man was too careful, and the young man seems to be a very capable man. Yuki says it was nice to meet him, and the man said that he knows Clayman, and if the young man has time, he can visit his guild sometime. Yuki realized that the man had not behaved like that on purpose that time. It was just that his appearance was a little unfriendly, so the young man thought that the man recognized him as a demon. Then the young man notices several people who looked like guards, and then a man and a little boy. The man bowed and told Yuki that their young master had caused trouble for the young man yesterday. So on behalf of Mr. Butler, he wants to offer the young man his deepest apologies. The young man looks at the boy, who is the young master. The man says that he played too much yesterday and that's why he lost sight of him. The man asks Yuki to accept this small compensation. Yuki takes the package and thanks the man. Then they bow and leave. Yuki was wondering what was in the package. After all, the young man is the son of a rich family, so there might be something valuable there. The young man opens the bag and sees there a huge number of skewers with fried meat. There were a lot of them. Yuki then comes to the manor to visit Cecilia. He thinks that today is a very good day and no one is giving him a pass. The young man is greeted by Hepines, who addresses him as the captain and indicates which way he should go. Yuki greets Hepines and says that she shouldn't accompany him, as he knows this place very well. The girl asked the young man to follow her. This is her job, so the young man should not refuse. Yuki has no choice but to agree. He thinks about why the girl is so serious. Hepines leads Yuki down the hallway, and he starts shaking all over because he's finally going to see Cecilia. The young man is about to open the door but starts to get nervous. Hepines calls him shy, and Yuki shouts and asks who the girl is talking about. Hepines asks what the young man is talking about. Yuki asks why the girl treats him like that, but Hepines doesn't show it. Yuki shouts that there's definitely nothing wrong with his hearing. Happens then asks if Yuki has really calmed down. Yuki is surprised and then apologizes to Happens. Thanks to her, he can now control himself. He thinks that Happens is really that good. The main character smiled and thought that it was time to go in. Then Yuki comes into Cecilia's room and rejoices. The girl was sitting and reading a book, and then she notices Yuki and tells him that they haven't seen each other for a long time. The young man scratches his head and says it feels like about 6 months have passed. The girl giggles and says it's actually only been half a month. The young man is still funny. Then the young man changes the subject and says that he brought the girl some food. She looks at the contents of the bags and says that they contain cupcakes and fried meat. The girl is surprised and says that the young man's gift is very peculiar. Yuki laughs and says that in fact, he got all this absolutely for free. Cecilia then smiles and says that it looks like Yuki has already gotten used to life in Minerva and this world. She continues and says that she remembers the day when the main character was in the castle of the demon lord. Then he said he wanted to die. The girl smiles and asks the young man how he feels about his real life now. Yuki started talking. He said he was happier than ever right now. Perhaps it's because now he has someone to live for. More than anything, he wants to spend this life with Cecilia. She is the reason for its existence. The girl said it sounded really cool. She too, like Yuki, wants to find meaning in life. Yuki says it's not that difficult. Cecilia giggles and tells Yuki that he doesn't need to be modest. She says it's been a long time since they last met, so she suggests eating cupcakes together so she'll make them tea now. Yuki agrees and then asks if it's not a maid's job. Cecilia replied that Sophia had taught her a lot. Her culinary skills have reached a new level. Yuki thinks that now he wants to try it. After a while, Cecilia made tea and the young man sat with the girl at the table and enjoyed tea. He was very relaxed. The young man said that the tea was delicious and he was just happy. The girl replied that the cupcakes were fine too. Yuki thought that for some reason he had a feeling that he had forgotten something. Then the young man felt a gift box for Cecilia in his pants. He remembered that he was here to give her this pendant. The young man continued to sit with Cecilia at the table. He saw her eating cupcakes, closing her eyes with pleasure and talking about how delicious it was. He kept the box in his pocket with his hand. Then he realized that this was his only chance. Then he felt something and abruptly stood up from his seat. Cecilia asked Yuki what happened to him. Yuki went to the window and said that he just thought it would be nice to ventilate the room. Then he noticed something in the window. He saw Hugo and Mikin right in front of Cecilia's house. Yuki wondered if they were eavesdropping on them. The young man used sensory enhancement. At that moment, Hugo was overjoyed and told Makana to take a look, because they had come to Cecilia's mansion. The young man suggested that she go and greet the girl. Mikin asks Hugo to stop, and then asks if the young man remembers why they came here. Hugo said that of course he remembers it. They had made the mistake of leaving behind such a valuable comrade as Cecilia. That's why they're here, so she can scold them. Mikin called the young man stupid and said that everything was wrong. She punched him in the forehead. Hugo told Makana that it was too painful. He asked if the girl really did it because she was worried about him. He thanked her. Mikin was confused and asked who had put these strange thoughts into the young man's head. Yuki realized that it was his doing. However, now he understands for sure that Hugo is a real lover of pain. Then Hugo turns to Makana and asks if they will go. The girl asks if the young man remembers that they owe her an apology. Yuki thinks about it and then realizes that things are very bad because Hugo and Mikin are coming here. They can cause him a lot of problems. He would like to be alone with Cecilia. The young man asks Cecilia if she would help him with something. The girl does not understand what the young man wants from her. After a while, the young man grabs the girl by the hand and runs down the corridor with her. The girl asks if Yuki can tell her where they are going. The young man apologizes to Cecilia, but he thinks that it looks like he went a little overboard. However, there must be a place in this house where no one will find them. The young man asks Cecilia to wait for him here for a while. He leaned against the wall and thought about what to do next. Duke asked Raven how long he would be sitting here idly. She looked disdainfully at Raven, who was trembling. The girl asked him to hurry up and give her this gift, which he was holding in his hands. Yuki realized that Raven wanted to give Hepons a gift. The young man was talking about what if Hepons didn't like this gift. It seems to him that this is somehow too harsh. He was afraid that if she refused him, then how would he live on? Duke said he was a knight, so he had to calm down. She reminds him that he even took time off for this, so he should stop being so pathetic. The young man said that the girl was right, so he would just do it. He went to the door but suddenly stopped and started shaking. Duke shouted at him to hurry up because if he lingered, then Hapin's lunch break would end soon. The young man apologized to Duke. Yuki wished him luck in his mind. Yuki thought that if he started worrying about Raven now, his situation might spiral out of control. Cecilia said that she was waiting for the young man here just as he said. Then the young man took her by the hand and led her after you. The girl screamed and asked where the young man was taking her this time. The young man then took Cecilia to the courtyard. Till was there chatting with Sheik and asking him to listen to her. She said she went to see the gargoyle yesterday. He looked really cool. Then she turned away from her words and said that he was always like this, but yesterday he was even better. Then the girl asked Sheik if he was listening to her. The young man grinned and shouted that he was actually asleep. Thiel said it was too early, but anyway she had to tell him. Yuki realized that Till was raving about the gargoyle again. He told Cecilia that this place wasn't suitable for them either, so they should move on. They saw Sophia and Celia. Celia asked the girl if everything was okay with her daughter. Yuki looked at them carefully. Cecilia approached the young man and whispered that it was very ugly to eavesdrop like that. The young man replied that he was just curious. He thinks about how Clayman and Sophia have already had a baby. Sophia told Celia that it was hard for them right now, but she still didn't want her daughter to become like her father. Celia asked if that was it. Sophia's husband is quite an interesting man. The girl said that nevertheless, it would be problematic if she overcame his character. Then Sophia appeared in the doorway and turned to Yuki, asking if he was all right. The young man got scared, grabbed Cecilia and shouted to her that they had been discovered. They ran on, and Cecilia shouted to Yuki that she had already told this young man. After a while, they come to the library. Cecilia tried to catch her breath, and then turned to Yuki and asked him to tell her exactly what he was looking for in this house. Yuki thought that there was no place in this house where they could be alone. Yuki apologized to the girl and said that she was probably very tired because of her. He takes out a box with a pendant and hands it to Cecilia. The girl is very embarrassed. She asks if Yuki really wants to give her this jewelry. The young man asks if the girl remembers the moment when she couldn't buy this pendant in that store. That's why he bought this pendant as a gift. This time it's different. He reports that he is more serious than ever. The girl paused and then smiled and thanked Yuki from the bottom of her heart. The young man was very embarrassed, and the girl replied that she would keep his gift as the apple of her eye. Then suddenly the door to the library swings open. Yuki and Cecilia looked towards the doorway. Yugo was standing there and he turned to Cecilia and said that he had finally found her. Mikin and Hepans were standing next to him. Then he notices Yuki and asks about what they are doing here, just the two of them. He asked what it all meant. Suddenly, Mikin covered Yuga's mouth and said that Yuki and Cecilia looked very cute together. Perhaps she should reconsider her views. Raven and Duke then approached them. The girl told the captain that he was doing well. At one point, Sophia turned to the whole company. She called everyone dear guests and apologized to everyone for interrupting them, but she wanted to invite them all to the courtyard. Everyone looked at her and agreed. After a while, the main character, Cecilia, and everyone else stood in the courtyard and ate meat on skewers. Cecilia turned to Yuki and said it was great that he had brought so many grilled meats. The young man agreed with the girl's words. Then Hugo called Cecilia and asked if he could call the girl for a minute. The girl agreed and Yuki stepped aside. Hugo says he knows he made a big mistake. He started saying that's why the girl should scold him. However, Mikin didn't let him finish, instead hitting him on the head. Then she dusted off her hands and exhaled. The girl turned to Cecilia. The next moment, Mikin sat on her knees and apologized to Cecilia for telling the girl the truth. Cecilia was very surprised. She smiled and said that if Mikin was talking about that incident, then it was fine. Mikin almost cried and said that the girl was her friend. Cecilia sits down next to Makana and asks if the girl remembers that they had no choice. As the girl sees, she is still with all of them. Cecilia holds out her hand to the girl and says that she doesn't need to torture her anymore. Mikin rejoices and thanks Cecilia for her forgiveness and all these words. Yuki looks at the girls and thinks that everything will finally be the same now. Then someone pulls on his clothes. Yuki turns around. He sees Happens from behind, who is holding a beautiful feather ornament. Yuki asked the girl what happened and then asked if the jewelry in the girl's hands was really a hair clip. She says it's her gift. Yuki realized that this jewelry was a gift from Raven. Yuki said that Happens rarely gets gifts, so why doesn't she try on this piece of jewelry? She agrees and then puts on a hair ornament. Then Sheik notices them. He tells Happens that this hairpin is very cute. Yuki also tells Happens that this jewelry suits her very well. Happens is embarrassed and thanks Yuki for this compliment. Yuki thinks that Happens looks so happy. He thinks Raven did a great job. However, he had just seen him so drooping. It's probably because Happens didn't answer him. Duke was cheering him on. Yuki was very interested and he decided to observe from the side. Then suddenly someone calls him from the side. Yuki turns around and asks Cecilia if they have finished their business. The girl agrees and then thanks the young man. She says that it was thanks to the young man Mikin and Hugo that they were able to reconcile. The young man says he felt a little guilty, so he wanted to help them in some way. Cecilia says it's very sweet. For some reason, ever since she met Yuki, a white streak began in her life. She hopes that he will continue to take care of her. Yuki says he hopes so too. He thinks that for some reason he feels like they've been dating for a long time. At least if it goes on like this, it will be great. The next day, the main character comes to the Adventurers Guild. He knocks on the chair and asks Clayman when he will be promoted to A rank. The man was looking through some papers at that moment. He asked why he suddenly had to raise him to a rank. Yuki says that all this time he was assigned only B rank missions. Clayman asks what the young man is talking about. He's only been in the guild for half a year, so B rank is still godly. Yuki says he wants to move on as soon as possible. Clayman scratched his head and told the young man not to even think about it. If he is promoted to A rank, then the number of difficult tasks will also increase, which means even more trouble at the mercy of Yuki. Then the man gets angry and says that it also means that he will have to work even harder. Yuki says that now it's clear why the man is constantly beating around the bush. He's just really lazy. Yuki returns from the Adventurers Guild and says out loud that he is very bored. He wants to take on something more complicated as soon as possible. In the end, Clayman turned him down anyway. If a person who joined the guild just half a year ago gets such a rank, it will undoubtedly cause discontent among the people. It's possible that Clayman is still eyeing him. However, it's most likely because of the trouble he's going to get because of the young man. The main character was upset by the realization of this fact. After a while, the young man came home and said that he was at home. Then Yuki said that is, when no one is at home, Guy just sleeps peacefully. The gargoyle said that Yuki came home early today. Yuki says that you can say that what he wanted to do has already been resolved. He thought that, so to speak, the negotiations had been unsuccessful. In that case, Guy says he has something to say to the young man. Then he took on his real form. Yuki asked what had happened. Yuki asked why Guy suddenly did it. The gargoyle has acquired its true form. His body began to crack. Yuki was scared and asked what it was. He noticed the many huge cracks that were located on the gargoyle's body. Guy said that the damage from the last battle was too great. His body cannot return to its original state. Yuki asked Guy why he was only talking about it now. He said that if he had told him earlier, what would have changed it? Yuki replies that there must be some kind of treatment. Seal will definitely find a way to help the gargoyle. Guy says that life and death are not something they can decide. He didn't have much time left. In 5 days, his body will completely collapse. That's why he wants to ask Yuki to take care of Till. She's the same as him, meaning she hasn't fully recovered yet. Yuki asks if it's real. The gargoyle said she's been getting worse and worse lately. He has been watching the girl since childhood, so he immediately sees any changes. Yuki agrees and says that he will take over Till. Guy apologizes to the young man for bothering him and says that's all he wanted to say. Yuki objects and says that he has one thing, but Yuki gets into a cool pose and says that he definitely has to help Guy too, because he has already decided everything. Guy asked if it was possible that the young man had hit his head. He says his time is running out, so it's all pointless. Yuki asks how Guy can know if he will succeed or not if they don't even try. The young man asks Guy to just rely on him. It would be too boring in this house without him. Hasn't he always been a great piece of art here? Guy says he doesn't have high hopes and all he can do is sit and wait. He reports that he trusts Thiel in the hands of a young man. Yuki thinks that Guy will always worry about Till until the very end, even if his life is in grave danger. Yuki says that if it's about demonic items, then asking Duke is the most appropriate solution. But now he's trying to figure out where to look for her now. After a while, the young man comes to the Knight's headquarters, where Duke and Irina were already there. Yuki enters the Knight's headquarters, and Duke is surprised that the captain has come here. Yuki tried to catch his breath, and then said that he had finally found a girl. Duke asked what the captain needed, and then asked him to wait a bit as she needed to sort out some paperwork. He agreed and went towards the sofa. He flopped down on the sofa and said that he was very tired. If only he could fly, but then Cecilia would be mad at him. The main character was sitting and resting when Irina suddenly approached him. She introduced herself, and then said that she sees that the young man and Duke always help each other, so she wanted to find out what's between the young man and Duke. The young man passed away and said that his name was Yuki. He thought about how the girl seemed to be easily fooled. He said that he and Duke used to have a boss-subordinate relationship. Yuki was the captain of Duke. Irina was surprised and said that Yuki was a very wonderful person. Irina asked what kind of captain the young man was. Yuki said it was top secret. If he tells the girl, then she will have to say goodbye to her life. Irina was very scared. Duke suddenly came up to them and asked the captain what he had said to Irina here. The young man apologized and said that he was just curious to see her reaction. Duke said she didn't know what the young man had told Irene, but it wasn't true. The girl asked if this was really the case. Duke replied that captain was just a nickname for a young man. She informs him that she and the captain need to talk in private. Irina says that in that case she will go and then bows. Yuki says that since it's about demons, Duke must be very aware of it, so he had a question. Duke listened to Yuki and said that the gargoyle's body was slowly collapsing. Duke said that magic minerals can solve the problem. Everything is very simple. Yuki was surprised that it was really that simple. He thought that it couldn't be that simple. Duke said that Guy should probably have known about this, to which Yuki replied that all he was doing was sleeping in the temple. That's why it's logical that he doesn't know this. Duke asked what was better for the young man. As a member of the demonic race, he shouldn't have such questions. Yuki apologized to Duke and said he was just too lazy. Anyway, thanks to Duke, he found a way to save the gargoyle's life. He thanked the girl, and Duke replied that there were no problems and she was happy to help. However, the young man thinks about where to find the magic minerals now. He's also trying to figure out what they look like. He's already thinking about going back and asking Duke about it. Suddenly, he is shouted at from the side. The young man turns and sees Cecilia running towards the young man. Cecilia is out of breath and tells Yuki that everything is really bad with Till. Yuki gets scared and asks if this is really the case. The priest said that Till was cleaning and suddenly fainted. Shite is with her now and takes care of her, but the girl asked to call him here. Yuki thinks that for some reason the gargoyle and Till both started to feel bad, and are they just connected? Cecilia asks about the gargoyle and wonders if anything could have happened to him. Yuki then told Cecilia everything, and the girl was surprised that the gargoyle had 5 days left before death. Yuki said that he had found a solution. The solution is that they need magic minerals. Cecilia asked if that was really the case. Yuki said that they needed to take care of Till now anyway. After a while they come to Till's house. The girl felt very bad. Sheik greeted the captain and Yuki asked how the girl was feeling. At that moment Sheik was sorting out the medicines and preparing them for the girl. Sheik said he would do his best, but he didn't have enough medicine. Yuki said that he understood, then he would go and look for something else. Sheik said that was what was required of the captain. He's counting on the young man. Sheik said that the current time is temporary, so he can't leave the girl alone. Sheik's eyes were very tired. Cecilia asked if Sheik was really worried about Till too. The young man replied that this was indeed the case, because he was also to blame for the girl's condition. The main character asked all of them to rely on him because he would bring medicines. Cecilia objected to the young man and said that she would take it upon herself. Yuki asked Cecilia what she meant. The girl replied that Yuki had really forgotten that he had to take care of the gargoyle. Sheik handed Yuki a list of herbs he needed. The young man said that he hadn't forgotten, and then replied about the list that there were a lot of herbs here. Sheik then asked what Cecilia and Yuki were talking about and what was wrong with the gargoyle. Yuki decided to tell me what was going on. Then Till's voice was heard. The girl asked if Yuki was really telling the truth. Sheik says that the girl can't get up because she needs to rest. Till screams that she's going to be okay and they have to hurry up and save the gargoyle. Tears begin to form in her eyes, but she continues to ask the boys for help. She takes the girl by the hand and asks her not to worry, because Yuki will definitely find a way to save the gargoyle. Cecilia continued to smile and radiate warmth and light. Thiel asked if it was real and then said it was wonderful. She added that a girl shouldn't just forget about herself. Shik, Yuki, and she will take care of Till, so you don't have to worry about anything right now and rest. Thiel falls asleep after Cecilia uses magic. The girl turns to Yuki and says that her job is to heal and restore people's health. That's why the young man should leave this matter to her. She smiled sweetly at him. Yuki agrees and Shik asks them to let him help Till too. Yuki then says that then he will go to look for magic minerals. Cecilia informs me that in this case, she will go to get medicinal herbs for Till. The young man asks Cecilia and Sheik to do their best for Till and Guy. After a while, the main character comes to the merchant guild. The man who works in this trade guild apologized and said about the magic minerals that this product is not available yet. Yuki was surprised and asked if they really didn't exist at all. The man gave a positive answer. Yuki was upset and thought that before coming here, he had carefully checked that what he needed was for sale here. Then suddenly Clayman appears next to the young man. The male employee greets the man and apologizes for waiting. He said that the information he requested about the mission was already ready. The man gives Clayman a piece of paper. Everyone was thrilled to see Clayman, and others asked if he was really that popular. Clayman turned to the man and asked if he understood correctly that this mission was more difficult than the last one. He agreed and said that the reward had also increased. Then Clayman looked at the young man and greeted him. He said that the young man was just in time. Yuki said he was refusing, and Clayman added that he hadn't said anything yet. Yuki says that he wants the young man to complete this task, but now is not the right time to do so, as he needs to find magical minerals. Clayman asks about the magic minerals, and then adds that in this case he is very lucky. They can be obtained by completing this mission. Clayman said that if the young man helped him, then so be it, he would share it with him. The young man asks if it really is. Clayman asks what, in his opinion, the young man wanted to be promoted to a rank. Given Clayman's authority, he could put in a good word for the young man. Yuki wonders if this is really the Clayman who sidesteps all the troubles. He can't even believe it, but it doesn't matter now. Clayman said that if the young man needed these minerals urgently, they could move out tomorrow morning. Yuki says that this is very good because he will do anything for a magic miner. The man says they have an agreement. The male merchant asked if they were really taking on this task. Clayman agrees and says that he will do everything possible not to let the man down. Yuki thinks about Clayman that he thinks too much of himself. Yuki then asks if the man can fill him in on the details. Clayman says that simply put, you need to collect magic minerals. They're leaving tomorrow morning, so they should meet in front of the guild at dawn. Clayman says goodbye to the young man, and Yuki does not understand why the man so superficially told him the details about this case. Yuki thought that he didn't have a choice anyway. Cecilia and Shite are doing their best, so he should give it his all too. The next morning, Yuki meets with Cecilia. The young man is very surprised when he sees Cecilia next to the carriage. A girl greets a young man. The young man greeted her in return. He asked her what she was doing here. Cecilia said that she wasn't alone and then pointed at Sophia, who was sitting in the carriage. Clayman was also sitting in the carriage. Yuki and Cecilia got into the carriage, and the young man asked what all this meant. Cecilia said she went to places where they sell medicinal herbs, but they didn't have what he needed. These herbs only exist in places filled with magic, so she asked Sophia to help and go there with her. Sophia added that the mistress of the mansion was in trouble. As the head maid, she couldn't just stay away. Yuki thinks it's very cool. Sophia added that moreover, her husband said that he also needed to go to this place on assignment, so she decided to go there with him. Yuki says he understands, which means they have the same destination right now. Yuki then asks if he can ask a question. He points at Clayman and asks what happened to him. Sophia, with an indifferent face, says that Clayman objected to her, but Yuki and Cecilia should not worry since she has already settled everything in her own way. Clayman blinks and then gets up from Sophia's lap. Clayman says he only sleeps so sweetly on Sophia's lap. Yuki asked if Clayman had really regained consciousness. He's talking nonsense. Cecilia said that Clayman's healing ability was incredible. Clayman grinned and said that Sophia was the best healing magic for him. Yuki says that he knows that the man has just come to his senses, but you can tell him about the assignment because he needs to be aware of the situation. The man says that they will need to destroy the monsters that live in the magical mineral mines. He had heard that they weren't stronger than the C rank, but they couldn't be 100% sure of that. Yuki thinks there's nothing wrong so far. The main character asks about the most important thing, whether they will arrive there on time. Yuki thinks that if things don't go according to plan, he'll just fly to the gargoyle with the magic minerals. Clayman suggests they don't report to the guild yet. Cecilia asks why all of a sudden. Clayman says it's so they can enjoy the trip to the fullest. Suddenly, Sophia hits him and asks her husband to watch his tongue. Clayman said he understood the girl's request. Yuki and Cecilia thought it was cruel. After a while, they arrive at their place of residence. Sophia looks at the hotel and says that they will spend the night here, and tomorrow morning they will finally reach the mines. Cecilia agrees with the girl. Yuki thinks that if he thinks about it, he's never seen Sophia except as a maid. He wonders what she's going to fight in. The next morning, Sophia comes out to Yuki and Cecilia and says that the hour has come. The young man is surprised and asks that she is still in her maid uniform. Cecilia asks if it's even okay to fight in this. Sophia says that this outfit is an individual combat outfit, so they don't have to worry. Her husband said that he likes to see her like this. The girl was embarrassed. Then Clayman came up to them and asked what was wrong with them, and then informed them that they needed to go ahead. They come to a cave somewhere. Cecilia uses the magic of light to light the way for the whole group. Yuki says he's been whispered that a man loves maids. The man was surprised, and then asked why the young man was suddenly asking him this. Yuki said that Clayman had said earlier that he liked it. The man understood what the young man was talking about and said that when he sees Sophia in this outfit, he feels calmer, because it gives the impression that she is doing a simple job. Yuki is surprised and says that he understood what the man was talking about. Clayman adds and asks the young man not to think that he is forcing her. Yuki says that, to be honest, he is jealous of their love. Clayman asks what the young man means. Yuki then changes the subject and asks if Clayman and Sophia really have a child. The man gives a positive answer and says that they have a boy and a girl. It's amazing that their son looks like his mother and their daughter looks like her father. Then Sophia turns to them and says that maybe they will stop engaging in idle chatter, because the monsters have already approached a long time ago. Yuki is about to go ahead and tells everyone that the monsters are already here. But then suddenly Sophia appears. She swings her foot and destroys all the monsters. Yuki stands in a shocked state and looks at what is happening. Sophia instantly leveled the monster to the ground. Clayman says that Sophia, despite the fact that she now works as a maid, she is still strong. He knows that the young man also wants to protect Lady Cecilia, but this is his and Sophia's territory. Clayman activates magic and a lot of paper men appear next to him. Yuki asks Cecilia what it is. The girl says that this Shikigami is a divine creature. This is a martial arts technique that manipulates objects that look like humans or animals. However, Yuki says it's the first time he's seen anyone use paper dolls in combat. Cecilia agrees with the young man's words and then says that they are actually quite strong. Sophia says that he always wanted to fight without taking full part, so he chose this technique. He thinks it's too much trouble to change their forms, so he lets them fight as they are. Yuki says that's to be expected from him. Sophia says that everything is here, so they should move on. The young man examines the map and says that it seems to him that they have already made quite a lot of progress. A little more and they will reach the mining area. Then Clayman looks into the distance and sees a huge and chubby monster that eats some rocks. Yuki was surprised that it was very big and it had some kind of strange color. Clayman replied that this monster feeds on magical minerals. Ordinary stone-eating monsters only eat ordinary stones, but mutants like him don't have enough of them. Yuki says that if he continues like this, then they won't get anything at all. They need to deal with him in no time. Clayman asked him to stop and said he wasn't done yet. By devouring magical minerals, this monster's body undergoes changes. Magical minerals contain magic. In other words, they wouldn't do any damage to him with magic alone. He points his finger at Cecilia and Yuki and says that's why they won't be able to resist this monster. Sophia slaps his hands and orders him not to point fingers at people. Meanwhile, Yuki was thinking that they wouldn't do any damage to this monster. If a young man uses advanced magic, then he is sure that he can easily defeat this monster, but there is very little room here. Clayman says there's something else Cecilia and Yuki shouldn't forget. Mutants like this monster are very rare, so they must keep it intact. Sophia asked Clayman why he took on such a stupid assignment. The man shouted at the girl not to hurt him and said that he had already thought everything out. It's really very simple. He points at the young man and says that he will use Shikigami to cover the young man's body, and then you will have to defeat the monster from the inside. He asks the young man what he thinks, because it sounds just brilliant. Yuki screamed and asked why he was the one, and why the man couldn't do it himself. Clayman replied that it was because he needed to manage the Shikigami, so he wouldn't be able to do two things at the same time. He tells him that the dolls will protect him, so he shouldn't worry. Yuki shouted that he wouldn't do that for anything in his life. Then Sophia interrupted them and said that she would do it. Clayman was surprised and said that the girl couldn't do it because he wouldn't let Sophia do it. The girl replied that she was the only one here who fought in close combat. She comforts her husband and says that everything is fine. As long as he uses his technique, everything will be fine. The girl asks if she is speaking correctly. Clayman agrees. Sophia smiles and says that she is counting on her love. The man says that in this case, he just can't let the girl down. Yuki tries to figure out what it is with Clayman, because this is the first time he sees him like this. The man turns to Yuki and Cecilia and asks them to watch the monster carefully. Then he gives the command to start the task. After Clayman's command, Yuki used the grounding lock spell and Cecilia used the holy chain spell. The monster was restrained from below with the help of stone spikes and was also bound with a chain. Suddenly, he growled loudly and began to pull free. Yuki used even stronger magic and shouted that it looked like they had underestimated their enemy, so they needed to strengthen the power of control magic. They used a holy chain, a grounding lock, water pressure, and a snowstorm. The monster let out a roar again. Cecilia was scared and said that the roar was so loud, but Sophia interrupted her and said that now it was her turn. Clayman shouted that the monster had opened its mouth, and then shouted Sophia's name. He used his Shikigami magic and wrapped his paper dolls around the girl. She jumped straight into the monster's mouth with agility. At first, he didn't understand what had happened, and then his whole body began to distort from the fact that Sophia was delivering melee strikes right from inside the monster. Clayman summoned more of his paper dolls and then ordered the monster to stop resisting. He summoned the real Shikigami and sent them into battle. Yuki was surprised that Clayman had summoned real Shikigami. He said it was the first time he had seen him so serious. Cecilia replied that it was probably because Sophia was already inside the monster. Clayman turned to Yuki and Cecilia and ordered them not to let their guard down until the monster stopped moving. Cecilia and Yuki accepted the order. Finally, the monster fell senseless and Sophia was on top of him. Yuki extended his hand to Cecilia and said that she had done a very good job. She reciprocated with Yuki and said that they had done it. Yuki said he just did his best. Then Sophia landed on the ground and Clayman immediately ran to her and took the girl in his arms. He asked her if she was okay and said he was very happy. Sophia was embarrassed and said she was fine. She then pushed Clayman away and told him to stop and let her go. In any case, they haven't finished yet because they need to find more medicinal herbs. Yuki and Cecilia watched them and giggled. Yuki then walked over to the monster and started collecting magic minerals into his backpack. He was thinking that they still needed to collect herbs and that monster had scattered his stones everywhere, so it didn't seem like it would be easy. After a long time, they finally found what they were looking for. Yuki looked at the sky, where the full moon was already visible, and said that it was already so dark. Clayman said it was all over now, so they wouldn't be able to get home right now. He asks Yuki to just relax and they will leave tomorrow morning. Yuki frowned and said that he couldn't just relax. Then she turns to Cecilia and whispers to her if he can fly. The girl hesitantly said that it would look strange. Unnecessary questions may arise. She asks the young man what if someone sees him. Yuki thinks it's a big risk, but they can't delay. Sophia approaches them and asks if something really happened. Yuki says it's okay, he's just too tired. Sophia replied that she hadn't completed a mission from the guild in a while, so she wasn't in a good mood either. They need to go back to the boarding house and rest now. Yuki agrees. It was already late at night. When Yuki was lying in bed, he began to think about Till and Guy, who might not live to see the morning. The young man opens his eyes and realizes that he cannot sleep. He gets out of bed and sees Clayman sleeping next to him. Yuki realizes that it has been a long time since his last flight. He goes out to the dining room and sees Cecilia there, who was sitting at the table and drinking tea. Yuki asked the girl what she was doing here. The girl replied that she was waiting for Yuki. She approaches him and gives him a bag of medicinal herbs. She asks the young man to give them to Sheik. Yuki agrees and says that Cecilia's request will be fulfilled. Cecilia says Sophia sleeps so soundly, so maybe today has been too exhausting for her. She also told the owner of the boarding house that she would keep an eye on the house while he had dinner, so if Yuki wanted to fly, now would be the time. Yuki understands that Cecilia has planned everything so carefully. He thanks her and asks why she is doing this. The girl smiled and said she was just wondering if he would do it or not. She said that the owner of this house often goes somewhere, so he's not here right now, but she thinks he'll be back soon. Yuki thinks Cecilia is very caring. He thanks her for everything and says he's on his way. The girl smiles and wishes the young man to take care of himself. Then Yuki goes outside. He activates his wings and horns, and then says that in order to use the full extent of his power, he has to take on this form. If he had a choice, he wouldn't do it, but this is an emergency. Yuki goes home. He quietly sneaks into his room and thinks that even though he lives here, he still needs to be careful. Yuki enters the house and tells the gargoyle to wake up. He looks at Guy's cracked head and screams that it's too late. He starts shaking him and asks him to wake up. Yuki starts telling Guy that he's not a good person and asks if he's really going to just give up and leave the girl alone. Guy suddenly wakes up and shouts at the young man to stop screaming. The main character exhales and says it's a relief that he made it. Guy says that since the young man interrupted his last dream, the path tells him what he needs. Yuki agrees and then orders Guy to eat something first. He stuffs magic minerals into his mouth. The young man shouts that he will explain everything to him later, but first he has to do what Yuki tells him. Guy begins to crunch the magic minerals and says that he has no idea what the young man wants to achieve with this. Then suddenly, the cracks on Guy's body begin to disappear. The gargoyle examines himself and does not understand how this happened. Yuki exhaled and said that he was fine now. Guy shouted that in any case, the young man should not shove anything into his mouth. Yuki apologized and said that he was just in a hurry. Guy says it was delicious, so there was no need to rush it. Yuki asks if Guy is really talking about minerals. He gives me the bag and says there's still half of it left. Guy is happy and says that he will eat every last crumb. Yuki realized that Guy liked these minerals so much that he couldn't understand his tricks. Guy was beaming like a child at that moment and enjoying the goodies. Guy then takes out one of the minerals and asks what it is. Yuki thinks that this is the horn of the stone eater and thinks about how he got here. Guy decides to eat this horn. He says it's strange because this stone has a completely different taste. Then he starts screaming and asks why his whole body is starting to heat up. Yuki was scared. Guy beamed all over and started shouting that he was incredibly hot. Terrified, Yuki asks if he's okay. Suddenly, Guy takes on his true form. His arm returned to its place and wings appeared. He and Yuki looked at each other and didn't understand what had happened. Yuki thought about how Guy had wings and horns. It must be the power of the remains of the mutant stone eater. Yuki then says that he doesn't have much time and needs to go, and then says goodbye to the gargoyle. He arrives at Cecilia's mansion and enters the room where Till is lying, and Sheik was next to her bed. Yuki thinks that Sheik has been with Till all this time, and anyway, he cares a lot about this girl. Yuki wakes Shika up and asks him to wake up. He says he brought medicinal herbs. Sheik asks Yuki who he is. Then he opens his eyes and asks the captain why he has such an appearance, because he looks like some kind of demon. Yuki says it's temporary. Yuki hands Sheik a bag and asks him to take these herbs that he asked to bring. He needs to go, so he asks to take care of Till. Sheik agrees. Then Yuki sits in a tree and thinks that it's time for him to go back now. He flies to Clayman, Cecilia, and Sophia, but before that he tears off his horns and wings. Yuki lies down in bed and thinks that he is so tired that he wants to sleep. The next morning, Sophia wakes Yuki up. She asks the young man to wake up. Yuki gets up with her eyes barely open and tries to recognize Sophia. The girl says that because she and Clayman didn't wake up, she had to wake them up. She says it's time to return to Minerva. Yuki opens her eyes and thinks that it's really time for them to go back, but there's no need to rush right now. After a while, everyone was already in the carriage, but Yuki was swaying from side to side. Cecilia, noticing this, asked if the young man was okay. Clayman sarcastically asked what he was doing at night, that he didn't even get enough sleep. Sophia told the man that he was actually sleeping soundly too. Yuki thought that he was exhausted, he didn't have the strength to answer them. He apologized and said he was very sleepy. He was lying with his head on Cecilia's lap. She was looking down at him with a very sweet smile on her lips. After a while, Cecilia asks the young man who was lying on her lap if he was awake. She also tells him that they are almost there. The young man got up from the girl's lap. Clayman giggled and said that Cecilia and Yuki are so close that sleeping on a girl's lap is so cute. Yuki understood what the man was talking about and asked for forgiveness. Cecilia smiled and said that everything was fine and she didn't mind it at all. She thanked Yuki and asked if yesterday had really been an incredibly eventful day for him. Yuki looked at the smiling Cecilia and then thought that no matter how hard it was, receiving such an award was worth all his efforts. Then he said that when he gets home, he will immediately go to bed. Clayman said he'd had enough sleep and needed to go out to eat, but Yuki decided against it. A few days later, Till was crying at Yuki's house. She said it was a great relief to her that Mr. Gargoyle was okay. She is very sorry that she did not have the opportunity to visit him. Guy apologized to her for making her worry. He didn't tell her because he didn't want her to worry about him. He apologized to her again. Yuki tried to fall asleep and listened to Till ask Guy why he was apologizing, because she wasn't accusing him of anything. But then she suggested changing the subject. Guy turns around, looking at Yuki, and says that everything is thanks to this young man and he is very grateful to him. Till agrees and says she is grateful to Yuki too. They kept thanking him. The main character was lying down at that moment and thinking that his eyes were closing. Till thanks Cecilia and Yuki once again, and Yuki thought that Till and Guy were much better now. The girl hugged the gargoyle and was very happy. The main character decided to leave the house and told them that he would not interfere. A few days later, Yuki also woke up to the fact that Till had come to Guy. Till goes to the gargoyle almost every day, and then they arrange various pranks together. At this time, Yuki has to watch them. The young man realizes that he cannot live in this atmosphere all the time. But to be fair, they both almost died recently, so their behavior is understandable. He just needs to be patient for a while. However, he cannot leave the house all the time. He walks through the streets of the city and thinks that he walked around the whole area and did not notice anything interesting. Then he notices the crowd and wonders why there are so many people there. He decides to ask a passerby what's going on here. A beastman man turns to him and asks if they have met before. Yuki greets him. The man says that since the demon lord was defeated, the trade and exchange market has expanded. Now even rare artifacts can be purchased here. Yuki thinks this news is very cool. He says goodbye to the beastman and says that it is rare to see such a lively atmosphere. He needs to walk around and see what's here. He thinks his mood has lifted. Then the young man notices Clayman walking. He approaches the man to say hello. Yuki asks why the man is here and if he really came shopping, and then wonders if there is anything new in the guild. The man replies that he took the day off and it has nothing to do with that stone eater. Clayman says he needs to buy a wedding anniversary present and he has no idea what to buy Sophia. Yuki says that the man somehow caught himself a little late. Yuki said that maybe Clayman could find something here. The man asks if the young man really thinks so and then adds that this is why he came here. Yuki offers to help the man and Clayman tells him to do whatever he wants. Yuki then asks him to look in his direction. The main character shows a cute headband with cat ears, while smiling at him. Yuki says that this hairpin will look perfect with the maid's uniform. That's exactly what Clayman likes. He offers to give him this piece of jewelry, but the man is indignant and says that it does not suit his taste at all, so he will not give it for anything. He says it's an anniversary present, so the young man should stop messing around. Yuki apologizes and says he just forgot. The man says that he's not himself today and asks if everything is okay. He thinks about how he's probably a little excited. He's been through so much that it's only now that he's feeling better that he's in a better mood. He gives the money to the seller and he discreetly puts the jewelry in the man's backpack. He wants to make fun of him. Then Yuki starts shouting that he noticed something very cool. Clayman turns to look at him. He asks the man to look at this black color and says that it is a long coat, which is usually worn by children with 8th grade syndrome. The girl says that the boy has good taste. From the material to the design, this coat can rightfully be called the best. Yuki said he was taking it. Then he picks things up because they all look really cool. The man said that it seemed to him that the young man had gone a little overboard when he looked at his huge bag on his back. Yuki said that he doesn't have much time to buy things for himself, so he takes this opportunity to buy everything he needs. Clayman says that so far the young man is taking something very strange. Yuki said that he buys what his heart tells him, a heart with 8th grader syndrome. Clayman says that the young man's heart is also very strange. Then he says he's found everything he needs, so he doesn't care. The main character looks at Clayman's gift, namely a set of overseas spices and a new apron, and thinks that the man has a talent for giving gifts. Then he thinks that he's done shopping and asks where they're going next. The man asks how about taking on a new task at the guild, since he helped the young man choose a gift. Yuki excitedly shouts that this is a great idea. Clayman asks if he really thinks that. Yuki asks the man to wait. He runs to change clothes around the corner and immediately returns. After a while, the young man appeared in a very strange guise. He was wearing a black helmet, a black cape, and a huge sword on his back. He laughs and asks Clayman how he likes his new look. The man asked if the young man was probably joking with him. Yuki turns around to show his sword, a blade that resembles lightning, and then says it's pointless to argue because his blood hasn't boiled like this in a long time. He screams that now no one can stop him. Clayman scratches his ear and thinks that this guy is absolutely incorrigible, and if he says anything to him, he will only make the situation worse.